Meditation, whispered Lin Feng. Meditation, whispered Lin Feng. What the teacher meant is that Lin Feng seemed mature because he had high natural abilities, but it was also possible for him to fully unlock these natural abilities. Kind-hearted people have high natural abilities. That's right, what I do doesn't always correspond with my true state of mind, thought Lin Feng. After everything that had happened to him, the pressure from society and all these stupid people who constantly provoked him, it was hard for Lin Feng to find the time to meditate so he could contemplate spiritual problems. Lin Feng didn't know how to react in certain situations. For example, when Duan Tianlang destroyed the Yunhai sect, he had captured Han Man and Pajun, then sold them to the Bai clan, who then made them into slaves. How could Lin Feng not kill all the members of the Bai clan? He hated them from the bottom of his heart and hated how they had done that to millions of others. He knew that it was wrong, but he couldn't help it. He had to kill them, because those people would repeat their actions on others if they continued to live. Nobody could escape from the 7 human emotions. The strongest cultivators always acted on their ideals with firm convictions. "Teacher, may I ask you to teach me how to play the zither?" asked Lin Feng very politely. "Meditate," said the teacher indifferently, and then continued, "Your thoughts and behavior are not in perfect harmony. You need to meditate more often. You need to forget about the chaos that reigns in our world. You need to wash off the dust you have accumulated in your heart over the years. Don't let the chaos of the world to take control of your pure heart and prevent you from becoming stronger. Meditate, cleanse my heart," repeated Lin Feng in a low voice. As before, the music of the zither penetrated deeply into Lin Feng's heart. Lin Feng sat down in the middle of the peach trees and started meditating. He slowly closed his eyes. The teacher, as before, wasn't raising his head and continued playing the zither. When Meng Qing saw that Lin Feng was meditating, she moved behind him and continued to enjoy the view. She looked at the peach trees in blossom with pure admiration. She had never seen peach trees in blossom in her life because there weren't any within the Black Wind Mountain. The music was extremely peaceful and auspicious. It enabled people to forget everything and let the music invade deep into their hearts. In Lin Feng's mind, different images appeared, the moment when he first arrived in the continent of the 9 clouds until the moment when he was disowned by the Lin clan and when he had to leave Yangzhou city. When he had returned to the Yunhai sect, Duan Tianlang annihilated the Yunhai sect. Then, he recalled the moment when he had left for Duanren city. All of these images were still very clear in his mind. But in Lin Feng's mind, there was no hate and no pain. It was as if he was another person who was observing all these things from the outside. He was calmly looking at all these moments in his mind. His heart was filled by the beautiful melody of the zither and was very peaceful. The music was probably suited for meditation. Even his spirit didn't represent as a hindrance to him benefiting from the positive effects of the music because it wasn't harmful to him. It was helping him to wash away all of the negativity and hatred that had gathered in his heart. Lin Feng was feeling so relaxed that he progressively fell asleep. The leaves of the peach trees were still fluttering in the wind. After some time, Lin Feng slowly opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he immediately saw the teacher who was still calmly playing the zither. Meng Qing was still looking as pure and innocent as ever, she was still standing there motionless. She almost looked like a statue which had been there since the beginning of time. Lin Feng slowly got up. At that moment, he looked surprised and had a strange expression on his face. 5th Ling Qi layer. Lin Feng checked his cultivation level. That's right, he had suddenly broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer. Meditation, the result is amazing, thought Lin Feng. He had a big smile on his face. Breaking through to the different Ling Qi layers wasn't easy, but Lin Feng had broken through to the 4th Ling Qi layer a short time before and was on the precipice of breaking through to the 5th, but was unable to. Surprisingly, he had broken through to the next Ling Qi layer during meditation. Thank you, teacher. Lin Feng had been able to break through to the 5th Ling Qi layer thanks to the help from the teacher, so he was feeling very grateful. The teacher finally stopped playing. He raised his head and looked at Lin Feng with a soft and tender expression. No need to thank me. You broke through to the 5th Ling Qi layer relying on your own power. The pure Qi in your body was already enough. You had already reached the peak of the 4th Ling Qi layer, which is why you managed to break through to the 5th Ling Qi layer so quickly. I just helped you clean the negativity which was holding you back, said the teacher while smiling. His tone really showed how much he appreciated Lin Feng. He treated Lin Feng like his own son. Even though the teacher's strength and power was probably immense, he had never been arrogant like the other teachers Lin Feng had encountered in the past. If you hadn't played the music, then I wouldn't have come here. If you hadn't played the music to help me, then I wouldn't have broken through to the next Ling Qi layer. Teacher, thank you so much, said Lin Feng honestly and wholeheartedly while smiling. The teacher slightly nodded, then smiled and said, "All right, I am happy that I could help." Lin Feng had a warm smile on his face and said, "Teacher, last time, you said that you would teach me how to play the zither. Can you teach me now?" The teacher looked at Lin Feng and said, "Are you not afraid of wasting your cultivation time? Shouldn't you be improving your cultivation level right now?" "Improving my state of mind is part of cultivation training," said Lin Feng while smiling. The teacher was pleasantly surprised and was nodding his head with a smile. "Since you want to learn how to play the zither, I will teach you," replied the teacher. "Whenever you have time, feel free to come here and I will teach you. Today, I just want you to listen. You must listen to others first before you can learn how to play for yourself." "All right," said Lin Feng. Listening to the zither helped him improve his cultivation and it was pleasant to listen to. There was no reason to refuse. The teacher once again started playing the zither. Lin Feng and Meng Qing sat down next to each other under a peach tree and listened to him play. In Lin Feng's room, a few people had gathered. Lin Feng, Lu Fei, Han Man and Pejun. Lin Feng looked at Han Man and Pejun and said, "Are you guys sure?" "Yes, Lin Feng, big brother, I am sure," said Han Man while nodding his head. He was wearing a golden mask to cover the slave mark on his face. These slave marks that were carved into their faces would most likely be there forever, but if they managed to reach a higher cultivation level, then they would possibly be able to remove them. This is why Han Man and Pejun were eager to become stronger as quickly as possible. Who could live with the shame of having such a mark on their face forever? "Lin Feng, big brother, I'm sure too," said Pejun. They were both older than Lin Feng, but they still called him big brother as a sign of respect. Lin Feng wasn't going to contradict them either. They were both 2 years older than him. It wasn't that large of a gap. It would be very different if they were much older than him. "All right, I will not try to prevent you from doing it," said Lin Feng while looking solemn and nodding. He then looked at Lu Fei and said, "Fei Fei, sorry for bothering you, could you write the letter and give it to them please?" Lu Fei nodded, took out a pen and immediately started writing. "Han Man, Pejun, what weapons do you use?" asked Lin Feng. "I don't need weapons. The earth is my weapon," said Han Man while shaking his head. Pejun didn't reply for a few seconds and then said, "I use a spear." "All right," said Lin Feng while nodding. Lin Feng stretched his hand, a light flashed and suddenly a pitch-black spear appeared in Lin Feng's hand. "Ha!" Pejun and Han Man were stunned. Had the spear really just appeared from out of nowhere? "No need to be surprised, I have a precious stone which enables me to carry a great deal of items with me at all times," said Lin Feng. Pejun was extremely moved. Not only had Lin Feng saved his life, but he was also so kind and generous towards him. "Pejun, that spear is for you," said Lin Feng while handing over the spear to Pejun. As he grabbed the spear, suddenly the qi from the spear rushed into his flesh and blood. It was as if that pitch-black spear was alive. "This is a spiritual weapon. Be kind to that spear and take care of it during battle," said Lin Feng. Han Man and Pejun wanted to go and protect Duanren City. Spiritual weapon? Pejun's eyes shrank. He had already heard of spiritual weapons before. Spiritual weapons contained an extremely sharp energy and a pure qi. They were extremely precious. Cultivators of the Ling Qi layer would rarely get the chance to use spiritual weapons, but surprisingly, Lin Feng was giving one to Pejun. Pejun felt like his hand was incredibly heavy. At that moment, Lu Fei came back to them and gave a letter to Han Man. When you arrive in Duanren City, give that letter to my father and he will understand. All right, said Han Man while nodding. He then said, Lin Feng, big brother, we're off. Be careful, said Lin Feng while nodding. Han Man turned around and started walking. He was determined, but their training wasn't going to be easy. Pajun bowed in front of Lin Feng and followed Han Man. Lin Feng couldn't accompany them outside, it would have drawn too much attention. He just looked at their backs as they left and hoped they would take good care of themselves. Lu Fei was standing behind Lin Feng. She looked at the two silhouettes and said softly, Don't worry, they are strong. If there is a problem at the border, they'll know how to handle it. Lu Fei was standing behind Lin Feng. She looked at the two silhouettes and said softly, Don't worry, they are strong. If there is a problem at the border, they'll know how to handle it. Lin Feng didn't comment at all. The border was a dangerous place, how could she guarantee that it wasn't dangerous? But Pajun had said that with the slave marks on their faces, they would have to constantly wear masks while inside the imperial city, so the best solution was to go and protect the border. Pajun's decision was that of a hot-blooded cultivator and required a great deal of courage. These were the traits required when studying as a military student within the academy. You have almost completely recovered from your injuries, but you still need to rest more, said Lu Fei when she saw that Lin Feng wasn't replying. Lin Feng laughed and said, So you really do care about me? Lu Fei's expression changed and she said, Who else would? You perverted bastard. While talking, Lu Fei immediately walked towards the door. Lin Feng smiled wryly. It seemed like Lu Fei would always consider him to be a pervert. Lin Feng shook his head and started to leave. Behind him, he could hear that someone was following him. It was Meng Qing. She was silently following behind him. Lin Feng stopped, turned around, smiled wryly and said, Meng Qing, you don't need to come with me this time. Meng Qing shook her head and didn't reply. She just moved closer to him. Lin Feng's wry smile grew several times larger, but he didn't say anything. After all, Meng Qing was just worried that something could happen to Lin Feng. Besides, it wasn't a bad thing if Meng Qing was with him when he was outside. He had a lot of enemies. Don't worry, nothing will happen this time. I will be careful, said Lin Feng again, but Meng Qing remained indifferent no matter what he said. Meng Qing, people won't recognize me this time, but if you are with me, they will instantly recognize us, said Lin Feng while taking out a silver mask and covering his face. Meng Qing finally reacted and immediately said, All right, you go alone, but be careful. I will, said Lin Feng while slightly revealing his face for a few seconds to smile to her. He then turned around and left. Lin Feng arrived in front of a place which looked like a small city inside the imperial city. He paid the tax and entered. Without the slightest hesitation, he went to the prisoner arena. Just like last time, the prisoner arena was filled with a large number of people. Lin Feng looked at that sea of people from the top of the arena. Lin Feng started walking down the stairs. He was slowly able to see the arena more and more clearly. Inside the cage, there were more slaves and ferocious beasts. That was a scary place filled with the smell of death. At that moment, someone moved in front of Lin Feng and obstructed his way. Lin Feng's looked at the person in front of him from under his mask. Lin Feng gave him a purity stone of medium quality and the other person immediately let him pass without any problems. He was approaching the lower rows of seats. Lin Feng sat down on one of the first rows and calmly looked at the arena. At that moment, a snake beast was fighting against a cultivator. The head of the snake was flat and wide. It looked really ugly. Black smog was coming from its mouth. That snake was very vigorous. It was still small compared to its matured state. It was a second-level Ling ferocious beast. It still needed time to reach maturity. Ferocious beasts and practitioners were quite similar when it came to cultivation. Fighting enabled both to become stronger with increased life and death experiences. Just like humans, all ferocious beasts were not equal. Some humans had high natural talent and abilities while others didn't. Ferocious beasts were the same in that aspect. There were some of them which could become terrifying when attaining maturity, while some others had a very limited strength. That species of beast was already incredibly strong when reaching the Ling level. It was even said that when reaching the peak of the Ling level, they could sometimes defeat some other ferocious beasts of the early Xian level. They were usually extremely strong. But the snake which was battling at that moment was only a second-level Ling beast. It was far from reaching maturity. What surprised Lin Feng is that he surprisingly recognized the cultivator who was fighting against the snake. He knew him incredibly well. It was Lin Hong, Lin Badao's son, Lin Qian's brother. He used to study at the Ice and Snow Mountain village before but had come to join the Holy Courtyard. At that moment, Lin Hong had already broken through to the second Ling Qi layer. Lin Feng didn't have the impression that Lin Hong was particularly strong. The Lin clan used to hate Lin Feng and called him a piece of trash. They thought that he was exceptionally weak. But at that moment, he had already broken through to the fifth Ling Qi layer. There was probably no junior member of the Lin clan who could defeat him. Amongst the elders of the clan, there also wasn't many who could defeat Lin Feng. The fact that Lin Hong had already reached the second Ling Qi layer was actually quite normal and was nothing exceptional for someone of his talents. Lin Feng glanced at the crowd. Then, a group of people drew his attention. They were also sitting on the viewing platform. They were watching Lin Hong and muttering between themselves. Look at that snake, even though it is very strong, Lin Hong can easily defeat it. Lin Hong's ice attacks could easily freeze the entire snake. He will obviously win this battle. Hee, of course. It's great that Miss Qian allowed Lin Hong to fight against that snake. Lin Feng could hear everything that these people were saying. He smiled coldly. It seemed like Lin Qian has also gained strength from when they last met. She was sitting with Chu Zhanpeng, who had also become a student at the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. With his strength, it would be easy for him to take care of Lin Qian. Being close to him, Lin Qian's status in society could only climb higher and higher. Ice and Fire Universal Spirit. I wonder what your cultivation level is these days, thought Lin Feng. He then stopped looking at Lin Qian. She meant nothing to him anyway. He turned around and continued to watch the battle. At that moment, Lin Hong's qi was oppressing the body of the snake and he was close to winning the battle. At the same time, Lin Qian, who wasn't sitting that far away from Lin Feng, frowned when she looked at him. She looked at Lin Feng's silver mask. The person who was wearing that silver mask was sitting in the viewing platform and calmly watching the battle. A light flashed through Lin Qian's eyes. Huh? Thought Lin Qian while intensely staring at that silver mask. Back in Yangzhou City, she had already seen that mask, and at this moment, she saw the same mask again. Could it be a coincidence, thought Lin Qian. She could never forget the piece of trash who had been expelled of the Lin clan, wore the same mask. It couldn't be him though, because the Yunhai sect had been completely destroyed. The survivors had mostly become slaves. It was impossible for Lin Feng to calmly sit there in the prisoner arena and comfortably watch battles. Besides, he was sitting in the front rows. Lin Qian hadn't learned about the fact that Lin Feng had survived. She just knew that an entire army of Qi Xia armored cavalry had gone there and destroyed everything. Wouldn't it be ridiculous if someone had managed to escape? That sort of rumor would never spread anyway, it would be too ridiculous to believe. At that moment, Lin Hong finally defeated the snake. He took his 8 purity stones of medium quality and walked towards the exit of the cage. The one in charge of that side of the cage brought the dead body of the snake out and replaced it with a new ferocious beast. When the crowd saw the new ferocious beast, they were all stupefied. That ferocious beast was entirely red and was covered with flames. An extremely sharp qi emanated from its body. That ferocious beast looked incredibly hideous. When it opened its mouth, a wide forest of teeth sharp as razors appeared. That beast looked so majestic that it almost looked like the king of beasts. What astonished the crowd is that it had 2 fiery red wings on its back. What a terrifying ferocious beast, thought Lin Feng when he saw it. It looked majestic and an extremely strong chi was released from its body. Looking at it was almost enough to scare people away. Even when the one in charge of the cage had brought the beast inside, he had been very careful as if he was scared that the ferocious beast could attack him at any moment. It's a demonic fire lion. What the? Many people recognized the demonic fire lion. It was an extremely terrifying species of ferocious beast. There were some rumors about them which were widely known. If it reached the Xian level, it was said to acquire special powers and become almost invincible. The man who brought the beast into the cage started talking loudly. This is a demonic fire lion. It is a 5th level Ling beast. The person who defeats it will win 20 purity stones of medium quality. If you are able to tame this beast without killing it, then you can even take it away with you. When the one in charge of the cage finished talking, the crowd burst with excitement. When the one in charge of the cage finished talking, the crowd burst with excitement. The one who could tame it could take it away with him. That was incredibly tempting for all the cultivators in the arena. Owning such a beast would provide a cultivator with terrifying battle ability. But the problem was with taming the beast, being unsuccessful would likely result in death. Most of the people in the crowd would never want to fight against such a powerful ferocious beast. Besides, even cultivators at the 5th Ling Chi layer probably wouldn't be advised to fight against it. It would be extremely hard for them to stay alive, let alone tame the beast. Then, the one in charge of the cage started talking again. Of course, to enter the cage you should be at least at the 5th Ling Chi layer to fight against it. If you have broken through to inferior Ling Chi layers, you can also fight against it, but it would not be recommended. If you can't tame it, then just kill it. We will also give you 100 purity stones of medium quality. Many people were tempted to give it a try. The group of people with whom Lin Xian had come with were all students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. At that moment, everybody was staring at Lin Xian. "Mu Fan, don't you want to capture that demonic fire lion?" said one student to another called Mu Fan. He was captivated by the lion in the cage. He had broken through to the 5th Ling Chi layer, the same level as that ferocious beast. "Mu Fan, bro, if you want to give it a try, I can talk to the guy running things, then even if you lose it won't be a big deal, just don't get injured," said another student. Mu Fan was growing more and more tempted. If any of them had to go into the cage, then Mu Fan was probably the best choice. If he won and managed to tame the beast while fighting it, he could take the beast away as his own, but he probably would have to give up on the 20 purity stones of medium quality. They probably would not give the purity stones and also let you leave with the beast. It would be too great of a prize. Even if he lost, it wasn't a problem either as long as he didn't get injured. Who could refuse such a tempting offer? Suddenly, Mu Fan looked relaxed and said, "All right, I will give it a try." Mu Fan looked delighted. From what he had understood, the other student was actually proposing to give the lion to him as a present. That was exactly what it was in Mu Fan's head. "Mu Fan, brother, you're very brave," said the other student. Mu Fan then jumped through the air and landed in front of the cage. His eyes were filled with greed when looking at the beast. "What a nice agility technique, Mu Fan, bro. Show them how powerful we students at the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu are," shouted another of Mu Fan's fellow students so that everybody could hear. When saying that, Mu Fan made sure to clearly and loudly state the words, "Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu." He had said these words loudly and slowly to make sure that Lin Feng would hear him and understand his meaning. Lin Feng smiled. "The Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu? I'm sorry, I've never heard of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu, and besides, I don't know you, so I have no reason to care about your face," said Lin Feng. At that moment, many people were stupefied. How strange. He had never heard of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. All the students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu stood up and furiously looked at Lin Feng. That guy was crazy. "Don't do something that you will regret," said Mu Fan while evilly staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng laughed and said, "Oh really, I really don't know what you mean." Then, Lin Feng turned around and was about to enter the cage. Wait, said someone while quickly interrupting Lin Feng's movement. Lin Feng stopped, turned around and saw it was another student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. It was precisely the one who had convinced Mu Fan to go fight against the lion. "What do you want now?" said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. All those people were students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. They were Mu Fan's fellow students. Lin Qian was also sitting amongst them. "Let my brother Mu Fan fight this lion," said the young man coldly and indifferently yet sounding strict. He was wearing a set of magnificent and expensive clothes. It was clear to see that he was a noble from a powerful family at a single glance. "Since when do you decide who can fight or cannot in the cage of the prisoner arena?" asked Lin Feng coldly. "I didn't decide about that." "You can ask the one in charge of the arena who arrived first," said the young man indifferently. He sounded quite confident. Everybody turned around and looked at the man who had brought the lion into the cage. The man pointed at Mu Fan and said indifferently, "He was the first one to arrive at the cage. He will fight this beast." When he heard these words, a huge smile appeared on the face of the young man who had just helped Mu Fan. When Lin Feng saw the arrogant expression on Mu Fan's face as well as on the faces of the other students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, he said, "You're the one who decides here, good. I will not return to this place to be scammed into paying for this. I also advise to everybody else never return to this place again, stupidly spending purity stones to watch pathetic losers fighting rigged fights." When the young man heard Lin Feng, he frowned and said, "What do you mean? Was I not clear enough for you?" "I will explain again then," said Lin Feng while smiling underneath his mask. "I have heard a few times about the scandals which take place here. Surprisingly, there were some people who were seen losing fights in the cage but were saved. Can you believe it? I didn't believe the rumors, but now I see that this kind of scandal must actually be a common occurrence. The prisoner arena is unable to properly apply their own rules. This place is a joke." When the crowd heard Lin Feng, they all started whispering amongst themselves. Many people had also heard about the scandals which occurred here and some had even witnessed these things with their own eyes. When the crowd heard Lin Feng, they all started whispering amongst themselves. Many people had also heard about the scandals which occurred here and some had even witnessed these things with their own eyes. At that moment, the faces of the young man and the man in charge of the cage drastically changed. They looked extremely cold. When the man in charge of the cage saw that Lin Feng had returned to the viewing platform and didn't try to come into the cage, he turned to Mu Fan and said, "All right, since the problem is solved and you were the first to arrive at the cage, you may enter. Show everyone how majestic and heroic the students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu are. Show to everyone how easy it is for people like you to tame the demonic fire lion." Everyone was surprised. The man didn't care at all about what Lin Feng had just said. Lin Feng had been the first to arrive at the cage, so why was the man now saying that Mu Fan had been the first one to arrive? Lin Feng was disgusted. Besides, the man was also publicly advertising how great the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was. Lin Feng thought that such obvious methods were pathetic. But of course, Lin Feng's words had made everyone furious. He had humiliated them all, and not everyone could just ignore him. "I don't want to hear anything else from your filthy mouth," said the young man on the viewing platform coldly. Lin Feng looked at him through his mask, laughed and said, "That's the way noble cultivators do it, by cheating. If you want to give him the demonic fire lion as a present, you just decide to change the rules of the prisoner arena and use your influence to rig the fights. Isn't it nice to be able to use such a grand arena to give presents to your friends? Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. Directly giving him the demonic fire lion as a present will not help the holy courtyard of Shuiyu gain prestige, so the whole purpose of this fake show has failed," said Lin Feng coldly and indifferently. His words were getting sharper. Most people in the crowd agreed with Lin Feng. Even though Lin Feng was being very aggressive, nobody could refute what he was saying. He had been able to force the man to give Mu Fan the right to enter the cage before Lin Feng only because the young man on the viewing platform had a high status. That was unfair. This was definitely premeditated. The young, noble cultivator was furious. At that moment, Mu Fan looked at Lin Feng and said, "Since you're angry about it, Then why don't we fight and the winner can go inside? For what reason would I battle against you? Said Lin Feng while glancing at Mu Fan. He then indifferently said, you never said that you wanted to battle against the lion in the first place and I arrived before you, but you still wanted to go in first by using unfair arrangements, said Lin Feng. Mu Fan would definitely win the battle against the demonic fire lion, but that wouldn't be a real victory because it wouldn't help the holy courtyard of Shuayu gain a better reputation. It would actually be the opposite. It would be a humiliation for the holy courtyard. Mu Fan didn't want that. Mu Fan smiled and said, I understand now. You just have a big mouth and like to talk big, but in practice, you aren't able to do much. Exactly. Apart from a big mouth, you don't have much else to show. You don't even dare show your true colors. Hee, how could that liar compete with Mu Fan anyway? Mu Fan is considered as a genius at the holy courtyard of Shuayu. Defeating the demonic fire lion is a piece of cake for him. Each and every single student of the holy courtyard of Shuayu was bragging about how great their institute was as if they were all extremely strong, as if they were all the best cultivators in the world just because they cultivated in that institute. Lin Feng then said, the holy courtyard of Shuayu seems to be filled with the mightiest cultivators in the entire world. It seems like I was pretty ignorant. Yes, he acted recklessly. He surprisingly dared to provoke Mu Fan. More and more people firmly believed that Lin Feng was scared to fight against Mu Fan. But at that moment Lin Feng smiled and said, but I am really curious to see how strong a genius of the mighty holy courtyard of Shuayu really is. All the students of the holy courtyard were pleasantly surprised. Lin Feng surprisingly accepted the fight, which meant that he was going to die and they would regain their face. Everybody looked at Lin Feng, who slowly turned around and said, you and me go inside the cage. If you win then you get to live, but if you lose then I will kill you. How does that sound? When Lin Feng finished talking, the entire atmosphere in the prisoner arena became completely silent. Everybody, especially the students of the holy courtyard of Shuayu, was astonished. If you win then you get to live, but if you lose then I will kill you. Lin Feng knew how to talk big. Many people had their mouth wide open and simply stared blankly at Lin Feng. How cruel! How heartless! Not only had he accepted the battle, but he was proposing a battle to death. He was probably sure that he was going to win, otherwise he wouldn't stupidly gamble with his life at stake. Mu Fan was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. How could that guy be so arrogant as to propose a battle to the death? When Lin Feng saw that nobody was talking, he smiled and said indifferently, don't worry, I only know how to talk big and overestimate myself. After all, he's a genius of the mighty holy courtyard of Shuayu. He proposed the battle to save himself from losing face. I've just been showing off so far, but the students of the majestic and great holy courtyard of Shuayu should be able to easily defeat me. After all, he has the power to defeat a demonic fire lion extremely easily. There is no reason for him to refuse. Lin Feng sounded extremely aggressive and was clearly making fun of him. The students of the holy courtyard of Shuayu were gnashing their teeth and fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Immediately after, they looked at Mu Fan. The prestige of the entire holy courtyard was in his hands at that moment. When he felt that everybody was staring at him, Mu Fan felt oppressed. He felt like his heart was weighed down by a 1,000-ton weight. After everything that happened, he had no way out of this situation. Defeating Lin Feng was the only possibility, as he had to show everyone that he was strong and protect the reputation of the holy courtyard of Shuayu. If he didn't fight, he would never be able to look people in the eye again. People would also start to have a mediocre opinion about the holy courtyard of Shuayu as well. Mu Fan had no choice. Besides, he could see Lin Feng's eyes through the mask. His eyes always looked calm throughout their whole exchange. Seeing such emotionless eyes staring at him was terrifying. Lin Feng had challenged him to a battle to the death. Could it be that he was sure of his power to win? Mu Fan wasn't weak. He was quite strong and confident in his own power. But at that moment, Lin Feng's confidence had shaken his belief in his own power. He felt like the pressure was too high. A light flashed through Mu Fan's eyes and he said, while gnashing his teeth, I accept your challenge to a battle to the death. Now, let's get into the cage, said Mu Fan coldly while walking inside. Wait, said Lin Feng at that moment. Mu Fan stopped, turned his head and said, what's wrong? You and the man in charge of the cage already have an arrangement, as I already stated. I don't want to fight with both of you in the cage at the same time. What do you mean? Do you think that I am going to interfere and hurt you? Asked the man in charge of the cage to Lin Feng. The same thing happened a few days ago here. I heard the story on my way here. If it has happened once, then it can happen again. I heard it is also a very normal thing here. The man in charge of the cage was speechless. He looked at Lin Feng and asked, well, what do you want? I want someone else to referee our battle to the death. Of course, it cannot be a student of the Holy Courtyard and it also cannot be someone who works here in the prisoner arena. PFFF, where are we supposed to find someone like that to referee the battle? You are being ridiculous. Are you fighting or not? Said Mu Fan impatiently. But at that moment, someone in the crowd spoke, I will referee your battle to the death. At that moment, everybody looked at that person. He surprisingly wasn't sitting in the first rows of the viewing platform. He was actually a young man who sat at the back of the viewing platform. He looked incredibly friendly and courteous. He had a warm smile on his face, which gave the impression that he was incredibly friendly and easy to get along with. But he also gave other people the impression that they were inferior in comparison with him. The noble, young man shrank back when he saw that young man. He was gasping with astonishment. It was him. He surprisingly was there. The smiling young man moved down towards the arena and slightly nodded at Lin Feng. He then said, I'll referee the life and death battle, but I don't know if anyone has any objections to me being the referee. The smiling young man moved down towards the arena and slightly nodded at Lin Feng. He then said, I'll referee the life and death battle, but I don't know if anyone has any objections to me being the referee. Lin Feng was pleasantly surprised. The young man had a very kind and friendly look to his face. He had a warm smile on his face, and he gave off a gentle impression. He was perfect to referee. Nobody would believe he held ill intentions when seeing the young man. Even though Lin Feng didn't know him, he thought he seemed like a perfect referee. Lin Feng's gut feeling made him think that there must be something wrong. It was too perfect to possibly be true. I agree with that, said the young, noble and wealthy cultivator. He looked surprised. Mu Fan was astonished when he heard his friend. Mu Fan didn't know the young man who had just appeared. However, the young man who had proposed to be the referee had to have a high status, otherwise, his friend would have never accepted. Besides, he couldn't contradict the young noble cultivator even if he wanted to. What about you? Asked the young man towards Lin Feng. He smiled and added, don't worry, I will make sure that the rules are applied and that you both can have a fair battle. I will also make sure that nobody comes provoke you after the battle. What nice words! Lin Feng looked pensive. He was trying to guess who that young man could be, but he had no idea. Lin Feng was sure that the young man had a very high status and wasn't an ordinary person. Alright, since it's that way, you can referee our battle, said Lin Feng while nodding. Even though Lin Feng had the impression that it was too perfect to be true and that there was something happening behind the scenes, he still agreed. If he had a high status, then he wouldn't propose to referee and then violate the rules, he would lose face. And that would be unnecessary. Thank you, said the young man while smiling and nodding his head in a very polite way. Lin Feng turned around, looked at Mu Fan and said, shall we? Mu Fan stared at Lin Feng's eyes but couldn't see anything inside except coldness and calmness. There wasn't the slightest bit of anxiousness. The man in charge of the cage left. Mu Fan and Lin Feng were facing each other in the cage. Lin Feng still looked calm and fearless. Mu Fan raised his head and asked ironically, I am Mu Fan, student of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu, would you like to tell me your name? Duo Ming, said Lin Feng without thinking. At that moment, Lin Qian and Lin Hong were astonished. Duo Ming. Why did that name sound so familiar? His name was surprisingly Duo Ming. Back in Yangzhou City, Lin Feng had also worn that mask when he introduced himself as Duo Ming. Lin Feng, whispered Lin Hong. It was such a coincidence that Lin Hong couldn't believe they were different people. It can't be Lin Feng, said Lin Qian while shaking her head. If it were Lin Feng, how could he remain that calm while next to us? He even calmly glanced at us a few times. Besides, Lin Feng was not weak, but in Yangzhou City, he had only recently broken through to the first Ling Qi layer. It is impossible that he broke through to the fifth Ling Qi layer within half a year. There was a 4-layer difference between the first and the fifth Ling Qi layer, and it was a huge difference. The great majority of people required much more time to achieve something like that. If somebody was able to break through to 2 Ling Qi layers in less than a year, they were definitely a great genius. But even the greatest cultivation genius in the world could never break through 4 Ling Qi layers in 6 months. Lin Hong nodded when he heard Lin Qian. Lin Feng would have never been willing to fight against the 5th-level demonic fire lion. Therefore, it was impossible for that person to be Lin Feng. What was happening at that moment was just a coincidence, nothing more. Inside the cage, Mu Fan laughed and said, Duo Ming, we'll see if your arrogance is founded. When he finished talking, Mu Fan released a cold force which crashed into Lin Feng's body and oppressed him. He had the feeling his body was being weighed down by a mountain of weight. Force? Lin Feng was surprised. He hadn't thought that his opponent would be able to control forces. No wonder that the noble young man was willing to give him the demonic fire lion as a gift. Mu Fan was a talented genius and would probably be able to tame the demonic fire lion with only a little work. When Mu Fan saw that Lin Feng was surprised, he felt proud of the power he had obtained. It seemed like Duo Ming had overestimated himself after all. If he was already feeling oppressed by such a small amount of force, it would be easy to win against him. You just have a very big mouth. You're oppressed by just a little bit of force. Your strength doesn't even enable you to resist my power. Don't worry, I can release much more force than this. You could never compete with me. I now know that I was wrong to think you could be my opponent. You were just rushing to your own death, said Mu Fan. When he finished gloating, he took a step forward and released even more force which immediately surrounded Lin Feng's body, causing him to feel extremely heavy. Force, so what? Said Lin Feng while smiling. His body made a slight movement, and suddenly, the force around his body weakened a great deal. Lin Feng took a step forward, transformed into a shadow, and then he moved directly into the opposing force. With each movement Lin Feng made, whirlwinds were created around him and the atmosphere was emitting noises which sounded like tearing paper. It seemed like Lin Feng wasn't affected by the force and was tearing through it. Ha! Mu Fan frowned and groaned. He took another step forward and released an incredible amount of his force, which emanated extremely high-pitched whistling sound. His force was getting sharper and sharper as it moved towards Lin Feng. But at that moment, Lin Feng raised his hand and ignored the force released by Mu Fan. Something, which looked like a poisonous qi, emerged from Lin Feng's hand and surprised everyone. Lin Feng controlled force on a much higher level than Mu Fan. The force he released was different from that of Mu Fan. Because Lin Feng had a great deal of understanding when it came to forces, he knew how to make force almost invisible or change it to a thicker and heavier force. That is why Mu Fan's force didn't affect Lin Feng in the slightest. When the crowd saw the small amount of force that Lin Feng was using, which wasn't sharp at all, they were all surprised and had the impression that he was in an incredibly dangerous situation. I can control forces and my attacks are extremely powerful. Besides, I have already broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer. I am not scared of you at all, said Mu Fan while laughing. He stamped his foot onto the ground, which made a cloud of dust rise into the air. An even larger quantity of force emerged from his body and was moving towards Lin Feng's shadow at full speed. Suddenly, a bright white light illuminated the area between them. Everybody's eyes were wide open watching this scene. That guy is very strong. He can move quickly, he can control forces, and I can even feel some pure chi, said some people in the crowd while gasping in astonishment. It seemed like Mu Fan was incredibly dangerous. He definitely deserved to be a member of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. He was extremely strong. The situation was getting dangerous for Lin Feng. That guy, Duo Ming, will regret that he acted so aggressively against brother Mu Fan. He will not be able to withstand a single attack that our brother Mu Fan will launch. Mu Fan will definitely be able to kill Duo Ming with little effort, said the students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. They all agreed on that and were all convinced that Lin Feng was just going to die. Lin Feng's calm expression never left his face. It seemed like everything that was happening had no effect on him, as if the battle wasn't affecting his mood at all. Lin Feng and Mu Fan were moving closer and closer to each other. The forces were getting more and more intense within the atmosphere. Dust was sent flying all around. The two silhouettes were becoming hidden within the cloud of dust. There was still energy in Lin Feng's palm, which emitted a dazzling light. PSSS, suddenly, a small noise spread through the air, and a small dark light flashed through the air which made Mu Fan's body freeze in terror. Energy attack, how terrifying! In his mind, Mu Fan could only see the hideous silver mask transforming into an omen of death. Energy attacks were an extremely powerful tool for cultivators. Energy attacks were an extremely powerful tool for cultivators. Not only did it enable a cultivator to absorb all the energy around them, it also enabled them to control it and use it as their own. The energy attack was incredibly faint and did not look dangerous at all, but in fact, it was terrifyingly powerful. Mu Fan's force was absorbed by Lin Feng's energy attack. All the energy in the atmosphere was combining and adding to Lin Feng's power. How could he compete with him? At that moment, Mu Fan understood that Lin Feng could use an energy attack, which is why he hadn't been affected by his attacks. A cultivator of the 5th Ling Qi layer who could carry out energy attacks was beyond strong. How frightening! Mu Fan had only thought about retreating and escaping once he saw the energy attack. A cloud of dust appeared around Mu Fan and he started retreating backwards at full speed. Too late, said Lin Feng in a terrifyingly cold tone. Lin Feng moved like a shadow and his hand was rushing towards Mu Fan's body. Boom! A gigantic cloud of dust appeared all around the cage. Lin Feng's energy attack had struck Mu Fan's body in the blink of an eye, tearing apart Mu Fan's body and leading to his immediate death. Ha! The crowd was wondering what was happening inside of the cage. They couldn't see anything through the cloud of dust that was surrounding the cage. The students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu were nervously looking at the cloud of dust and trying to see what was happening inside. That guy, Duo Ming, dared be that aggressive and arrogant. He must already be dead by now. It's a shame that we cannot see his end through the dust, said one of the students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, which confirmed everyone's thoughts about the battle. Nobody was worried about Mu Fan losing against some nobody with no background. That's right. How could a person, whom nobody knew, compete with a genius of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu who could control forces and had broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer? However, they did not know that the person was Lin Feng, and he could easily overshadow Mu Fan. They would never put the likes of commoners in their eyes. Brother Mu Fan, congratulations on your victory, said the young noble student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. He was convinced that Mu Fan had won the battle. If he lost, all of the students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu would lose face. How was it possible for Mu Fan to lose to a nobody? Don't get excited too early, said a cold and indifferent voice coming from the cage. Everybody was astonished, and they could feel their hearts pounding in their chests. Someone who has no determination to risk their life on the path of cultivation. Someone who relies on status and puts themselves high above other cultivators, can never be strong, said the voice coming from the cloud of dust, which was slowly fading until only Lin Feng could be seen standing in the cage. Lin Feng slowly turned around. Mu Fan's body was lying on the ground in a terrible state. There was no doubt when looking at this scene that Mu Fan was dead and almost split in two. Boom! It was as if a bomb had detonated in people's brains. Their hearts were racing at full speed. The result of the battle was completely different from what they had expected. Lin Feng had won the battle. They had never heard of this person before, and he was wearing a silver mask to hide his face, yet he had required only his bare hands to mercilessly kill a genius of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu with a single strike. Lin Feng's eyes were still calm and his emotions were still steady. He had known the result of the battle since the beginning. Mu Fan lost. Each and every single student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu had their eyes wide open in shock. They couldn't believe the results of the battle, especially that Lin Feng had required only a single bare-handed strike to kill Mu Fan. He, a genius of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, only amount to this much, I see, said Lin Feng indifferently. Everybody from the holy courtyard felt anger in their hearts. They had been humiliated time and time again by his words. Lin Feng had just humiliated the students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu to the extreme and thus indirectly humiliated the entire holy courtyard. If the geniuses of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu were not even strong, how could it even have a chance to become recognized as the strongest institute? The students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu had such evil expressions in their eyes that it wouldn't be surprising if they ignited and flames burst forth. You were lucky to win, that's all. So you shouldn't be arrogant like that, said the noble and wealthy young man, which stupefied Lin Feng. How was it possible to be so unbelievably shameless? All right, shall we test my luck again? You can be the next to come down and fight me, said Lin Feng while raising his head to look at the young man. The young man was shocked. When Lin Feng saw that the young man wasn't replying, he continued, I guess as a student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, you are too weak to fight against me. Go and flap your filthy mouth somewhere else. The young noble student furiously glared at Lin Feng. Each and every single one of you keeps bragging about how strong and powerful you are, but when you are in a real battle, you cannot withstand a single attack. You often advertise how great the holy courtyard of Shuiyu is, but you are relying on such weaklings who fight rigged battles. You are all remarkably shameless, said Lin Feng, ignoring the young man's expression, and then continued, but I understand that you guys need to gain some prestige. You need to make other people believe that the holy courtyard of Shuiyu is influential and powerful, but it is clear from what happened that the holy courtyard only knows how to put on a show. Lin Qian was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. This guy's words were sharp. His words had killed all hope of the publicity strategies having any success for the holy courtyard. Everybody was wondering why this young man hated the holy courtyard of Shuiyu so much that he would directly interfere with their publicity efforts. The friendly young man was staring at Lin Feng and paying attention to every single movement and detail of his body. He's only broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer and he can already carry out energy attacks. That's not an easy accomplishment, thought the friendly young man who had been the referee. He still had a warm smile on his face, and he said, winner. At that moment, a silhouette was quietly leaving the cage. Lin Feng wasn't talking anymore. He turned around, looked at the cage and started to leave. Lin Feng said to the man in charge of the cage, can I come in now? The noble young man still did not reply to Lin Feng. It seemed like everybody actually gave a great deal of face to the warm and friendly young man. He then said, since he won the fight, what are you all looking at him for? Everybody was surprised, especially the students of the holy courtyard, who then nodded in a docile way. All right then, 20 purity stones for killing it or you can tame it, said the man in charge of the cage to Lin Feng. It seemed like everybody was particularly scared of the friendly young man, especially those students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Who could talk that calmly and make the students of the holy courtyard obey so easily? Lin Feng was looking at that demonic fire lion and smiled. That beast was really a terrifying monster. It was extremely strong, quick and agile. These 2 wings could lacerate the atmosphere. How could the noble young man refuse to offer it to Mu Fan? Besides, if Mu Fan had accepted, he would have had a debt towards the noble young man. Lin Feng happily handed over 20 purity stones, and the man in charge of the cage immediately let go of the demonic fire lion. He looked at Lin Feng with an envious expression. Roar, roared the demonic fire lion. Its body started shaking and it moved towards Lin Feng. It opened its gigantic mouth and unleashed flames from its mouth. The entire atmosphere was fire-red and filled with a scorching heat. Lin Feng was surprised. He jumped up into the air, brandished his long sword and moved it towards the beast. Crack! Crack! Rah! Oh! Two clear and distinct sounds spread throughout the atmosphere. The first one was the sound of bones being crushed. The second one sounded like an extremely painful howl. Both sounds were emitted by the demonic fire lion. A gigantic sword mark was slashed across the back of the demonic fire lion. A blurry blood stain appeared on his fur. Its gigantic body was crawling across the ground in pain. A weak white chi emanated from its mouth, but it was still mixed with some scorching flames. The crowd was stupefied when they saw the result of the attack. Even though Lin Feng was incredibly strong, how could the extremely strong 5th-level Ling demonic fire lion not withstand a single attack from him? Lin Feng was quite surprised as well, but immediately, a big smile appeared on his face. This battle was definitely interesting. So this was the plan all along. The lion couldn't withstand a single blow from an opponent. Thank you for your gift. I really appreciate it, said Lin Feng while raising his head and looking at the noble student on the viewing platform. Lin Feng was sneering at him with eyes filled with delight. The demonic fire lion had surprisingly been unable to withstand a single attack, and there was only one explanation as to the reason for this. They had weakened the demonic fire lion before the battle even started. They had prepared this weakened beast as a gift for Mu Fan, then Mu Fan would have easily been able to defeat it. A student of the Holy Courtyard of Shuayu defeating such a strong and powerful ferocious beast with a single strike, how much prestige would the Institute gain from such a feat? Everyone's thoughts were chaotic. They were confused because nothing had happened according to plan. Lin Feng had defeated the demonic fire lion. Lin Feng had tamed the beast while Mu Fan had lost his life with a single strike. Lin Feng understood why the one in charge of the cage had looked at him with envy a moment before. He knew that this purposely weakened beast was ultimately going to belong to Lin Feng. When he heard that Lin Feng was thanking him, the noble student looked annoyed. His expression was incredibly ugly. Anyone would be able to guess that he had made the beast weaker so that he could rig the victory in Mu Fan's favor. The entire crowd looked at the group of students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuayu as if they were despicable. The Holy Courtyard of Shuayu was really shameless and its methods were really cowardly. They were not as strong and influential as they always acted. They always tried to make it seem so, but in fact, this was not the case. They were all just frauds. The young noble student coldly smiled at Lin Feng and said, "Why thank me? Even though you brought the demonic fire lion under your control, it doesn't mean that it will always follow and obey you. It's not that easy to tame such a ferocious beast. It would be best for you to be very careful, just in case the beast feels like devouring you someday." When Lin Feng heard what the noble student said, he looked amused and said, "Don't worry, what you're saying is not my concern even if the demonic fire lion is many times stronger than me." When he finished talking, Lin Feng went to the man in charge of the cage and said, "So this demonic fire lion now belongs to me, right?" "Yes, it does," the man said, not sounding reluctant to hand it over, but Lin Feng didn't wait to hear the reply. He had already grabbed the chains on the beast and started to pull the demonic fire lion out of the cage. Lin Feng walked out of the cage and took a deep breath to savor and enjoy this moment. Lin Feng then glanced at the incredible amount of people who were watching him. Under his mask, he had a huge smile on his face. He then said, "Being able to win a 5th-level Ling ferocious wild beast is indeed a great thing. Once it grows to maturity it will reach the Xian level. I have really made quite a sum." The crowd was surprised. Made quite a sum. He actually meant that the demonic fire lion had earned him money. What did Lin Feng mean? Nobody had time to ask before Lin Feng continued, "If you like this demonic fire lion, it's still not impossible for you to obtain it. Shall we go see how much this will sell for?" Let's head to the auction. Everybody was astonished when they heard what Lin Feng said. How very cruel of him. Auction? He wanted to sell such a valuable ferocious beast after winning it? At that moment, the crowd understood what Lin Feng had said before. He would not get devoured by the demonic fire lion because he initially didn't intend to take it with them. Lin Feng had never wanted the demonic fire lion to begin with. Is that guy crazy? That's a demonic fire lion. Many people thought that Lin Feng was crazy for selling such a beast. They all thought that selling the demonic fire lion was a stupid choice. Of course, it was Lin Feng's choice to make, and he didn't feel like having the ugly demonic fire lion walking by his side. He would do best not to commit the crime of cherishing a jade ring. He wasn't strong enough to keep such a valuable beast. Even if it was a great ferocious beast to possess, he couldn't afford attracting the provocation of so many people. While he would not shy away from provocation, he did not want to invite it. He understood that in this world he would attract the attention of the wrong types of people and possibly get into trouble that could be avoided by having such a valuable pet. What Lin Feng needed at this moment was to become stronger and quickly. He did not want to rely on the strength of a ferocious beast. Lin Feng couldn't afford attracting other people's envy, which would cause him trouble. He already had too many enemies. Owning such a beast would be like provoking people to become his enemy. The opinions of other people wouldn't make Lin Feng change his mind. It was difficult to make him change his mind. He understood that he did not have the strength to own this pet. Lin Feng then left with Beast and left the prisoner arena. He was walking towards the market district. Some people from the prisoner arena left and followed alongside Lin Feng. The entourage looked incredibly majestic. Some people wanted to see how agitated the auctions would become with such a beast. Some others were interested in trying to purchase the demonic fire lion. Many of the people who followed from the prisoner arena were not short on purity stones. They had enough purity stones to spare, and a demonic fire lion was extremely valuable to them. If they had a demonic fire lion, they would be able to raise it until it reached the Xian level, which would make it invaluable. Besides, having such a ferocious beast walk next to them as they traveled would make them have an impressive and commanding presence. As Lin Feng and the group of people were walking, the crowd was growing larger and larger. The people were attracted by the prestigious impression this crowd gave. It was slowly getting out of hand. They were the subject of a widespread discussion. The news that somebody wanted to sell a demonic fire lion was quickly spreading through the districts. That's why more and more people were approaching to see the spectacle. Lin Feng was satisfied with this. He had feared that there wouldn't be enough people who would be interested in buying it. The more people that were interested, the better it was. That way, the price would be extremely high, which was a very good thing for Lin Feng. Lin Feng arrived in front of a square made especially for auctioning. There was a pavilion with several thousands of seats. The place wasn't as big as that of the territory of the prisoner arena. This place gave a cozy feeling when looking at the scenery. People could watch the auctions while being served tea and decide whether or not they wished to purchase the treasures. When Lin Feng saw this place, he smiled and walked towards it. When Lin Feng was about to arrive at the auction square, a group of people appeared in front of him, which made him stop. "Someone like you cannot have a demonic fire lion," said a boy coldly while staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked and said indifferently, "If I were you, guys, I would get the hell out of my way and go far away from here." These people were stupefied when they heard Lin Feng speak. Cold chi was being released from their bodies. All of them were far from being weak. "We will pay 100 purity stones of medium quality and take that demonic fire lion with us," said one of the group. "I gave you a chance, yet you are still morons," said Lin Feng coldly, and then continued, "I will count up to 3, if you don't get out of my way, I will have the crowd of people behind me kill you." Who would sell a demonic fire lion for 100 purity stones of medium quality? How stupid can you be? When they heard Lin Feng, the expression on the group of people's faces changed. There were many people who were behind Lin Feng who suddenly stepped forwards and gave intimidating looks towards the group. They were eager for the group to give them a try. 1. Lin Feng started counting. At that moment, even more people started moving forward from the crowd. 2, continued Lin Feng. He had a strange smile on his face when he noticed that these people were not reacting. Lin Feng's eyes suddenly revealed murderous intent, which made the group blocking his way completely shocked. Remember me, this is not over, threatened the leader of the men who was blocking the path, and then their group started moving out of the way. As expected, you do not accept my goodwill, bunch of morons, said Lin Feng coldly, and then added, in your next life, learn how to use your brains and remember not to threaten someone who just showed you a great kindness. How could someone dare to try and get my demonic fire lion for 100 purity stones of medium quality? Kill all of these people for threatening me and I will set aside 100 medium purity stones for you regardless of who wins the auction, said Lin Feng coldly. He was extremely calm as always, but the expression on the faces of the people who blocked the way suddenly changed drastically. Lin Feng was looking at all the corpses on the ground with his normal calm expression. Lin Feng had already given them an opportunity to leave when they had attempted to intimidate him and buy the demonic fire lion. But even after showing them mercy, they dared to threaten him. Since they had decided to make him their enemy, there had been no other choice but to kill them or they would have caused greater trouble in the future. Lin Feng was looking at all the corpses on the ground with his normal calm expression. Lin Feng had already given them an opportunity to leave when they had attempted to intimidate him and buy the demonic fire lion. But even after showing them mercy, they dared to threaten him. Since they had decided to make him their enemy, there had been no other choice but to kill them or they would have caused greater trouble in the future. As far as Lin Feng was concerned, he hadn't needed to move a single finger. A simple sentence had been enough to make many people move forwards to kill them. Many people had listened to Lin Feng thinking that if they managed to win the auction, then Lin Feng would definitely decrease the price for them. 100 purity stones of medium quality wasn't a small amount either. Lin Feng would obviously set aside the 100 purity stones of medium quality for them, no matter who won the auction. There are many strong cultivators within the Imperial City, thought Lin Feng while looking at all the people around him. A lot of them had already broken through to the 7th or 8th Ling Qi layer. There were even some people at the 9th Ling Qi layer. They were not dressed too extravagantly, but they could kill other cultivators as if they were stray dogs. Lin Feng continued walking towards the auction pavilion with his demonic fire lion. A pebble street was built leading into the pavilion. People of every status could walk on that pebble road freely. Lin Feng arrived at a passage inside the pavilion. Between 2 flights of stairs, there was a beautiful woman who was there to assist guests. She had a red face and looked very fresh and alluring. She was wearing very bewitching clothes. It made Lin Feng feel very comfortable seeing such a beautiful girl. "May I help you, sir?" asked the beautiful woman in the middle when she saw Lin Feng arrive with the demonic fire lion. She was smiling at him and welcoming him as she would for any customer. She seemed friendly and her voice was pleasant to listen to. "Yes, you can. I would like to sell this demonic fire lion," said Lin Feng while smiling back at her with a friendly attitude. The beautiful girl looked at the demonic fire lion, smiled and said, "Please follow me." The beautiful woman then made Lin Feng follow her into the passage. The crowd who was sat on the seating platform inside the pavilion suddenly saw a demonic fire lion arrive with Lin Feng. They were stupefied. They fixedly stared at Lin Feng. Could it be that that guy wanted to sell his demonic fire lion? Lin Feng didn't pay attention to the excited people within the crowd, and instead, he paid attention to the atmosphere inside the pavilion and thought that the place seemed very warm and comfortable. It seemed like it was specially made to make people feel comfortable and at ease. At the end of the passage, there was a stage where things would be sold. There was a set of heavy curtains at the side of the stage. "Sir, this way, please," said the beautiful woman when they arrived near the high stage. She then continued and went behind the curtains. But when they arrived behind these heavy curtains, there were other curtains and going through them led to a place dedicated to the people who had placed things up for auction. "Master Roan, this good sir would like to sell a demonic fire lion," said the beautiful woman to an old man. The old man was already standing up when Lin Feng entered the backstage of the auction pavilion. He was looking at the demonic fire lion and looked very interested. "The demonic fire lion of the Bai clan ended up in your hands," said the old man while smiling at Lin Feng. That smile was mysterious, but the old man seemed very happy. "Bai clan?" said Lin Feng. "Yes, the prisoner arena is owned by the Bai clan," said the old man while smiling. His smile was very strange, which made Lin Feng feel strange when seeing it. Now it makes sense. The Bai clan are the sole owners of the prisoner. This is why they used to call Bai Zhe the young master, and which is also why they sent some people to the Celestial Academy to catch me. But whether it is the young man in yellow clothes who was with Bai Zhe or any of the people working at the prisoner arena, I hate them all, thought Lin Feng. He was wondering what the relation was between all of those people and the noble student who had wanted to offer it to Mu Fan. He knew they were all connected, but he did not know how. "Hehe, I heard that many members of the Bai clan went to the Celestial Academy and got killed. Even Bai Zhe got killed when he went with those members. It seems like their strength is not infinite after all. Sooner or later, they were bound to offend the wrong person," said the old man. A light flashed through his eyes. His eyes seemed to be revealing that he knew something that he was not saying. Lin Feng was almost sure that this small city inside the imperial city had only one owner. And that its many districts were divided between many clans who were in direct economic competition. For example, the owners of this auction square and the owners of the prisoner arena would have been in direct competition. The owners of the prisoner arena were probably making more money than the auctions. "Do you have a particular request as far as the auction is concerned?" asked the old man while looking at Lin Feng, and then continued, "For example, what is the minimum price you are willing to receive? Or will you accept only certain specific items for an exchange?" "Purity stones are good," replied Lin Feng. "Alright, at the time of the auction, it is possible that some people will want to use other goods to bid. We will accept those items and then convert them into purity stones equivalent with their economic value. Then, we will take a small transaction fee from the total." "Alright. Can you please put 100 purity stones of medium quality aside after the auction and provide it to those people within the crowd?" "I promised those people in the crowd that I would provide it to them for their help," said Lin Feng. "There is no problem," said the old man while nodding. He then handed a golden sheet, on which the full contract was written, to Lin Feng. He then said to Lin Feng, "When the auction is finished, come back here and provide that sheet to receive your purity stones." "Alright," said Lin Feng while nodding, and then left. The beautiful girl smiled to Lin Feng and said, "Sir, our auction market has many good products. You can have a rest and see what we have to offer. If you are interested, you can also bid on the items." "Of course," said Lin Feng while smiling. He didn't need that girl to tell him that. He would obviously bid if he was interested in something. "Sir, this way, please," said the beautiful girl while showing Lin Feng to an available seat. There were already many people sitting and watching the auctions. Besides, Lin Feng noticed that many of the people there were wearing masks. They were all hiding their identities like he was. Nobody wanted to be recognized and let other people know their social status. "Why did you bring me here?" asked Lin Feng perplexedly, as this was obviously a place for the wealthy guests. "Sir, this is where our distinguished guests are seated, and all noble cultivators are also seated in this area. Only those who bring us valuable items to sell or who have a high status in society are allowed to sit within this area. This offers the best view of the auctions for all of our esteemed clients," explained the beautiful woman to Lin Feng. Her voice was so sweet and gentle. She was so pleasant to listen to that many people would patiently listen to her explanations. "Noble cultivators," thought Lin Feng while laughing. No wonder so many people were wearing masks. They didn't feel like being recognized by other people when buying from the auction. That would be too inconvenient. Those who didn't wear masks were just ordinary people. When Lin Feng walked towards them, everybody glanced at him and immediately ignored him. "Sir, please sit here," said the beautiful girl while pointing at a seat which was available. Lin Feng nodded and sat there. The seat that the beautiful girl had chosen for him was quite good. He could see everything with a single glance from here. He could clearly see all the items that were being sold. That woman was criminally beautiful. Her beauty and charm would definitely appeal to many men. Lin Feng moved towards the stone seat that the beautiful woman had shown to him and sat down. Ha! At that moment, Lin Feng had the sensation that the people behind him were staring at him and directing killing intent in his direction. He couldn't help but slowly turn around. A young man wearing magnificent clothes was sitting behind him. That young man said coldly, "Get lost, can't you see that you're preventing me from seeing the stage?" Lin Feng was stupefied. The beautiful girl then politely said to the young man in magnificent clothes, "Sir, you can sit on those seats over there as you please. If you don't like your current one, then I will gladly help you find a better seat." "Who do you think you are to speak to me like that?" said the young man while slowly turning his head towards the beautiful woman. He looked incredibly cruel. He then looked at the beautiful woman with an evil smile on his face and said, "You're just a servant, nothing more. Come sit next to me, I will take you home and discipline you." When the girl heard the young man's evil words, her facial expression slightly changed, but immediately after, she smiled again and said, "Young master, please don't joke like that." When the girl heard the young man's evil words, her facial expression slightly changed, but immediately after, she smiled again and said, "Young master, please don't joke like that. Who would waste their time joking with you? Get over here, damn it. You're just a servant, that's all. There is no need to act like a noble woman," said the young man, sounding impatient and aggressive. Lin Feng frowned when he heard these words. In the imperial city, there were many strong cultivators who kept to themselves, but it seemed like there were even more of these arrogant and idiotic noble cultivators, who thought that everyone else was beneath them. The beautiful woman turned ghastly pale. She bit down on her lips. Her social status was indeed extremely low. In the continent of the Nine Clouds, being a servant was really one of the lowest positions one could have. Her job was just to welcome every guest with a big friendly smile. Her status was closer to a slave than a noble. Therefore, if that young man wanted to humiliate her, she really had no choice but to accept it without the possibility of defending herself. She remembered that one of her friends had been abused by someone from one of the noble families. He had bought her, then forced himself upon her. He had been so violent and brutal to her that shortly afterwards she died. What a tragic death! However, the auction market didn't intervene in such situations. Servants were just like slaves and not worth angering someone from a powerful family. They had been trained to entertain guests. That was their job. When the noble young man saw the woman's expression, his evil smile started to grow. He then continued, "I remember last time Meng Chong found a servant he liked, he enjoyed her until she literally died. If you don't come over here and do as I tell you, I will send you to the military barracks and we'll see how many men you can satisfy before you die." The woman was scared to death. Surprisingly, there was someone who wanted to take advantage of her. At that moment, a murderous light flashed in Lin Feng's eyes. What a shameless animal! That guy was pleased with the fact that he had the power to cause such a vulgar scene. The fact that the people of this world allowed animals like him to continue breathing was tragic. He was the filth and impurity within the world that needed to be cleansed. "You're not shutting the hell up because you obviously don't know how disgusting it is for other people to hear you speak, right?" said Lin Feng, still wearing his silver mask, while turning around and coldly glancing at the noble young man. Lin Feng's words surprised the man, who coldly said, "Do you know with whom you are talking?" "Of course, I know," said Lin Feng while nodding, which made the noble young man look interested. The noble young man smiled coldly and said, "Since you know who I am, don't you care about the consequences of talking to me that way? Or is it that you lost yourself because of the woman? Do I even need to think about the consequences when talking to a stray dog?" said Lin Feng with a mocking tone. He. When the other noble cultivators heard Lin Feng, they couldn't help but giggle and laugh. Lin Feng was utterly humiliating this young noble. When the noble young man heard the other people laugh, he was stupefied. His expression became even colder and he shouted, "Cripple his cultivation and throw him the hell out of here. Now bring the girl over here." "All right." Someone who was sitting next to him stood up and walked towards Lin Feng. That cold-looking man was wearing a simple gray robe. His posture was very straight. A whistling sound was emerging from his body as he moved. Lin Feng was stupefied when he saw the man launching himself towards Lin Feng as he clearly had murderous intentions. The qi that he was releasing from his body looked like the deadly qi which military troops released. He then remembered that when the noble young man spoke he had mentioned the military barracks. Could it be that he had a military background? "Wait, wait," said a loud voice at that moment which made the man in the gray robe stop and turn to the person speaking. At that moment, a silhouette approached and said to the young man, "Young Master Meng, everybody who is here is a distinguished guest participating to our auction. Therefore, within the territory of our marketplace, I must ensure that everybody is safe. Please abide our rules. Sorry for the inconvenience. Of course, if you are interested in that woman, I can give her to you and then you'll be able to use her as you wish." The person who had come was extremely polite, which made the young man suddenly look relaxed again. It wouldn't be a good idea to cause the managers of the auction to lose face. After all, their status was also extremely high. "Consider yourself lucky," the noble young man coldly said to Lin Feng. He couldn't attack Lin Feng in the marketplace, but as soon as he left, he would make sure to teach him a good lesson. "That servant girl can come to me herself. I will make her taste my hard rod in front of everybody here," said the young man, which made the girl turn even paler. She had given up all hope. She hadn't thought that a simple and innocent sentence would put her in such a difficult situation. Besides, she hadn't made any mistakes. The young man could have sat somewhere else if he didn't like his initial seat and she had offered to help him. But in this world, being right or wrong wasn't important, strength was important. Evil cultivators could do as they wished as long as they had the strength or status to do so. "All right," said the manager. He then looked at the beautiful woman and said, "Haven't you heard what young Master Meng said? Why have you not gone to his side already?" The beautiful woman was scared to death. She could only stand there shaking. She didn't know what would happen to her if she went over to the young man. How could this world be so wrong? "Ha!" The young girl had tears in her eyes and was starting to sniffle. She had to accept that this was the way of this cruel world. She then started walking towards the young man. When the noble young man saw that, an evil smile appeared on his face. But after one step, the woman was surprised that she had been stopped. She only saw that her little and delicate hand had been grabbed by a strong manly hand, preventing her from moving any further. "Sit here next to me," said Lin Feng coldly, which stupefied the beautiful woman. She looked moved yet hesitant to listen to him. "I am telling you to sit down here, you have no need to go anywhere else," said Lin Feng while holding her hand even more tightly and forcing her to sit down. The crowd was astonished. "I hope you will not make things any more difficult for us," said the manager of the auction. It seemed like Lin Feng didn't realize that the manager was doing him a favor. Lin Feng was treated as a distinguished guest. The manager hadn't considered how Lin Feng felt. The manager had even come in person to protect him, but Lin Feng couldn't distinguish good from bad, so obviously the manager didn't care about being polite. "Make things more difficult," said Lin Feng while smiling and looking at him. He then asked indifferently, "Am I a distinguished guest here or not?" "Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here," said the manager while nodding. "Indeed, I am a distinguished guest, which is why she had to receive me properly as was her job, but because she did, she is going to get punished and you want to give her to that filthy mutt. Don't you think that your actions are not respecting me at all?" said Lin Feng coldly. The manager did not care about respecting Lin Feng or him losing face. That beautiful woman had taken care of Lin Feng and had done her job properly, which is why the noble young man had gotten angry. Because of that, she was going to be forced into a fate worse than death. He was done being a bystander to the wrongs of this world. How could Lin Feng not intervene? From the beginning, the manager hadn't taken Lin Feng's thoughts into consideration and had completely ignored him. To avoid making the young man furious, he didn't care about Lin Feng becoming furious. When the manager heard what Lin Feng had said, he was surprised. He had indeed not taken Lin Feng's thoughts into consideration at all. He had only cared about the young man. Besides, he thought that the young man's status was much higher than that of Lin Feng, so Lin Feng should have shown him gratitude for stepping in. The manager suddenly looked less pensive and said to the beautiful woman, "Who allowed you to sit? Didn't you hear what I said? Go to young Master Meng." The young man had been furious because of Lin Feng, but because of what the manager had said, he felt overjoyed. Lin Feng and his status weren't even on the same level. "He's really shameless," said the noble young man in a low voice. He had a warm smile on his face. The manager of the auction market also thought that Lin Feng was being shameless. Lin Feng was stupefied. He looked at the manager and said indifferently, "What did you just say?" "Humph," snorted the manager. He pointed at the beautiful woman and said coldly, "Let her go to young Master Meng." Boom! The sound of stone being broken spread in the atmosphere. When the crowd heard the noise of stone being smashed during the auction, they all looked in Lin Feng's direction. When the crowd heard the noise of stone being smashed during the auction, they all looked in Lin Feng's direction. The crowd was stupefied. That area was reserved for distinguished guests. How could anyone make trouble in that area? There were also many people who had come with Lin Feng and they couldn't help but be stupefied when they saw Lin Feng smash the stone seating table into pieces. Lin Feng had caused trouble in the prisoner arena and was now causing trouble again. The beautiful woman was astonished as well. A moment ago, she had hidden her tears behind her hands by covering her face, and when she put her hands down, she saw the table and chair had been reduced to tiny pieces. She didn't know what to think anymore. Surprisingly, there was one person who was protecting her at her workplace, and it wasn't the manager. The manager was also surprised to see that Lin Feng had become so furious that he had reduced the furniture to rubble. Because he had ignored Lin Feng again, Lin Feng had become furious and the manager was actually slightly frightened. He was staring at Lin Feng. He looked cold yet vigilant. But Lin Feng ignored his facial expression and said coldly, "I brought my demonic fire lion to sell it here at your auction market, which makes me a distinguished guest here. Is this how you treat your distinguished guests though, by ignoring them and humiliating them?" The people in the crowd were very nervous. The demonic fire lion was very attractive. But they were very curious about Lin Feng. Someone who had brought a demonic fire lion had to be a distinguished guest of the highest level, but why was it that he was being ignored by the manager? "I am one of your distinguished guests, just like him, but from the moment I got here he has not stopped offending me. I did not go out of my way to offend him. You obviously have no idea how to treat your clients. You disregard me to make him happy and want to hand over the waitress that was serving me to him. You never once asked for my opinion or cared about offending me. He was the one in the wrong and yet you grovel to him like a dog. As one of the managers at the auction market, by acting with such disregard for me, do you believe I am unable to sell my demonic fire lion anywhere else?" said Lin Feng. He then stood up and said, "Since you have treated me with complete disregard, I want my demonic fire lion back. I don't care about being a distinguished guest here. I will take the demonic fire lion and all of the customers that followed me to another auction." When the crowd heard these words, they all looked at the beautiful woman on his side, as well as the noble young man who was sat behind him. They instantly understood that the young man was part of the Meng clan. This is why the manager did not dare to offend him. "Your intentions are good, of course you can have her," said the old man while looking at the beautiful woman. She was lucky to have met Lin Feng. Besides, giving her to Lin Feng wasn't a problem for the auction market as they had plenty of servants to replace her. Lin Feng slightly nodded, looking satisfied. He then said, "I hope that every distinguished guest will be treated the same from now on and not be more degenerates who will cause trouble." The noble young man's pupils shrank and he looked at Lin Feng in a very aggressive way. Lin Feng had humiliated him many times, calling him a dog and a degenerate. When the old man heard Lin Feng, he understood what he really meant. He then immediately turned to the young man and said, "Young Master Meng, this is the auction market and I hope that you do not plan on making us lose face. We will not accept such a disturbance from you again in the future. What you do outside is your business, but when inside the auction market, you best behave." The young man looked at Lin Feng in a particularly evil way and thought that after the auction, he would be able to deal with Lin Feng. He would definitely kill Lin Feng after the auction. This was not finished. The old man took the silence as an understanding to his warning. "Thank you, young Master Meng, for understanding," said the old man indifferently. He then immediately added, "I hope that everybody else will be wise enough to respect our rules. Now, I have spoken enough, let the auctions continue." When he finished talking, the old man glanced at Lin Feng one last time and his silhouette flashed as he left. Lin Feng looked at the vanishing silhouette while smiling happily in his heart. The old man had made things extremely clear. If the young man wanted to fight against Lin Feng outside of the auction then he could, but as long as they were inside he would be under the old man's protection. Lin Feng had made the young master furious, but as they were still inside the auction, he had no choice but to calm down and let Lin Feng sit in peace. However, the moment that Lin Feng left that old man's protection, the young master would have his revenge. "Thank you, kind sir," said the beautiful woman while looking at Lin Feng. The expression in her eyes looked infinitely grateful. She clearly understood that Lin Feng had felt compassion for her, which is why he had asked the old man to become her new master. She understood that Lin Feng knew that her situation would be miserable in the future. Lin Feng was saving her from an extremely tragic destiny. "I just did what any good person should do, no need to thank me," said Lin Feng. But the beautiful woman shook her head, showing that she disagreed with him. In her eyes the young man wearing the silver mask was so mysterious. He looked insolent and arrogant, but actually beneath his mask he was hiding many emotions. Looking very strong, he had attracted everybody's attention by smashing the table, which had purposely gained the attention of the old man to their current situation. The beautiful woman was endlessly grateful to Lin Feng. In spite of everything else, Lin Feng had protected her and had humiliated the noble young man because of her. He had also humiliated the manager of the auction because of her. If Lin Feng hadn't taken care of her, she would have become the property of the young man and her death would have been certain. Before, she used to think that she was just a servant in the auction market. She was just a servant who was only slightly above a slave. If she hadn't been beautiful and kind, then she would have probably been forced into slavery. She had never been respected by anyone, her dignity never mattered to anyone. But Lin Feng had protected both her life and her dignity. He had saved her from trouble and even thought about her well-being. She would be loyal and devoted to Lin Feng ever since the moment she became his. Lin Feng hadn't thought about any of this. Lin Feng had only done this because the mask could not hide the compassion which was within his heart. That woman had been humiliated by the young man because of Lin Feng. Lin Feng couldn't stand watching such a beautiful woman get defiled. He could not stand by and watch someone innocent suffer without doing something. Such actions were not within his heart. The auction continued. The heavy curtains opened and two silhouettes came out. It was the old man and a slave with a huge marking carved into his face. The marking was "Ba" in huge letters on his face, which was the mark of his enslavement. His arms and legs were restrained with chains. The auction continued. The heavy curtains opened and two silhouettes came out. It was the old man and a slave with a huge marking carved into his face. The marking was "Ba" in huge letters on his face, which was the mark of his enslavement. His arms and legs were restrained with chains. The huge mark coupled with his long and messy hair made him look like a savage. Cultivation slave, thought Lin Feng, stupefied. Surprisingly, there was a cultivation slave at the auction. Surprisingly, one could buy actual people at the auctions. At that moment, the crowd became really excited, especially those who had come from the prisoner arena and would frequently watch the fights on a regular basis. Ba Dao. It's Ba Dao. Finally, Ba Dao had reappeared. Part of the crowd had been waiting to see him again for a long time. The old man glanced at the crowd and saw that they were all very excited, which caused him to have a smile across his face. Ba Dao has broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer. He has won 81 battles at the prisoner arena, said the old man indifferently, which astonished the crowd. 81 victories? How scary! He had killed 81 people and had never lost a single battle. How terrifying! Lin Feng was stupefied as well. Winning 81 battles was easier said than done, especially against extremely strong cultivators of the 6th Ling Qi layer. 81 cultivators of the 6th Ling Qi layer had fallen by his hand. That wasn't a small amount. That was a terrifyingly large number, and to make things even more terrifying, he never got to choose his own opponent. Making the blood of 81 extremely strong cultivators flow had made him as strong as he was at that moment. I do not need to talk much about the price. Everyone understands that he will most likely break through to the Xian Qi layer. When he does, then he will be able to compete with even one of the 8 high officials. Everybody can imagine what it's like to possess a slave who is as strong as one of the 8 high officials, said the old man indifferently while smiling, and then continued, for Ba Dao, the starting price is 200 purity stones of medium quality. Let the auction begin now. When the old man finished talking, the crowd became even more enthusiastic and excited. Everybody was fixedly staring at Ba Dao. That's right, in the future, he would be as strong as one of the 8 high officials. If he was free, how powerful a figure he would be. As if he had just realized how enthusiastic and excited the crowd was, Ba Dao slowly raised his head. At that moment, a sharp force burst from his body. The crowd was shocked and got the feeling that it was dangerous to even look at him for too long. Ba Dao was glancing at the crowd. When he looked at Lin Feng had the feeling that Ba Dao's sharp glare could cut through anything. It gave Lin Feng a shiver down his spine. That was definitely blade force. While Ba Dao and Lin Feng were looking at each other, blade force and sword force filled the entire atmosphere. It was very sharp. But very quickly, Ba Dao glanced at other people, which suddenly relieved Lin Feng. His heart was pounding. How strong and powerful! That slave can control blade force. His force is also extremely thick and powerful, thought Lin Feng. No wonder that he had won 81 battles and never lost a single time. He could control blade force much better than even Mu Fan. It seemed like his blade force made him invincible against cultivators of his own layer. If there was a person like him who could use energy attacks, he would be able to oppress extremely strong cultivators who are even a few layers higher. The noble young man behind Lin Feng was extremely excited. A slave of the 6th Ling Qi layer who had killed 81 people? How tempting! If he could buy that slave, who would probably break through to the Xian Qi layer in the future, he would look imposing and majestic when ordering him around. 300 purity stones of medium quality, said one person. He immediately raised the starting bid by 100 purity stones. 500 purity stones of medium quality, said another person without hesitation. That price was already extremely low. A slave of the 6th Ling Qi layer wasn't necessarily very valuable, but a slave who had killed 81 people and would probably break through to the Xian Qi layer in the future was extremely valuable. 1,000 purity stones of medium quality, said another voice sounding detached, which made Lin Feng's heart twitch for a second. These people were really rich. Lin Feng remembered how poor he was in the past and how miserable that was. He was now much better off, but he still did not have the money that these noble cultivators had. The one who had just said that bid would probably spend the money of his family to buy that slave. 5,000 purity stones of medium quality, said another voice just at the moment when Lin Feng was thinking about how high the previous price was. He was stunned. 5,000 purity stones was a terrifying price. That was enough to practice in the cultivation tower for as long as you wished. Besides, that price had come from the noble young man behind Lin Feng. It was young Master Meng who wanted to buy the slave. When the crowd heard that price, they were all astonished. Many people were making a wry smile. At 5,000 purity stones of medium quality, they couldn't afford to pay more. That price was even slightly expensive for the slave. The old man uncommunicatively looked at the crowd, smiled and then said, "Young Master Meng has raised the bid to 5,000 purity stones of medium quality. This is a slave who, in the future, will break through to the Xian Qi layer. Is there anyone else who wants to bid?" said the old man, trying to tempt the others into bidding, but everybody remained silent. After all, 5,000 purity stones of medium quality was a terrifying price. 5,001, said a calm voice. The crowd was stupefied. They looked in the direction of the person who had just bid. The bid had come from directly in front of the young nobleman, and it belonged to Lin Feng. The young man's pupils shrank. He coldly stared at Lin Feng's back. 5,100 purity stones of medium quality. 5,101, said Lin Feng as calm as before. The crowd felt like they were watching a marvelous show. It seemed like Lin Feng was increasing the bid by a single purity stone each time on purpose. 5,500, said the young man, sounding colder and colder. 5,501, said Lin Feng, sounding calm and indifferent. The young man looked even more ferocious. But at that moment, the man next to him, who was wearing the grey robes, loudly interrupted him. "Young master, the auctions are just one method." The young man was surprised and then started smiling coldly. Indeed, if he wanted the slave, he didn't necessarily need to get him through the auctions. The crowd was stupefied. He had probably said that only to scare Lin Feng. The young man had decided not to bid again. A short moment later, the old man said, "Congratulations. The slave is yours. Leave him in the back for when I leave. You can auction my demonic fire lion and take the purity stones for the slave from its sale," said Lin Feng indifferently. The old man remained silent for a few seconds and then said, "No problem." The price of the demonic fire lion was always going to be much higher than the price of a slave. After all, when the demonic fire lion reached the Xian Qi level at maturity, it would become a god-like existence. When the demonic fire lion came out from the backstage, the crowd became extremely excited and enthusiastic. They were almost going insane with excitement. In the crowd, there was one person with long golden hair who looked very strange with a golden glow in his eyes. The young man with the golden hair whispered indifferently, "Nobody can take that demonic fire lion from me today." The old man on the stage was calmly looking at the excited crowd. He waited until the excitement of the crowd reached its climax. He then raised his hand to make the crowd calm down and immediately said, "I don't need to say much about the value of this demonic fire lion. I am convinced that many of you have already seen it at the prisoner arena and dreamed of having it for yourself. Finally, it is now available at our auction market. Now, everybody has an opportunity to win this fierce beast. As it matures, it will reach the Xian Qi level and maybe even break through to the higher Tian Qi level." The old man was extremely excited too. He didn't understand how the demonic fire lion of the Bai clan had ended up in Lin Feng's hands. The Bai clan would have never given it to someone who wasn't a member of their clan. They also wouldn't ever dream of taking it to the auction. It would always remain within their clan. The old man had no idea of what had happened at the prisoner arena. Back then, the young man in yellow clothes had wanted to give the demonic fire lion to Mu Fan as a gift, but it hadn't worked. Lin Feng had killed Mu Fan. But what made the young man in yellow clothes feel even more depressed is that he was also at the auction market and was forced to witness the sale of the demonic fire lion. He hadn't had a chance to steal the beast back from Lin Feng, as what he had expected was that Lin Feng was going to use the demonic fire lion himself and not immediately sell it. He had never thought that before he had a chance to act, he would see the demonic fire lion on sale at the auction. The old man looked at the crowd who were bursting with excitement. He then finally said, "All right, the starting price for the demonic fire lion is 500 purity stones of medium quality." Now, let the auction begin. The old man looked at the crowd who were bursting with excitement. He then finally said, "All right, the starting price for the demonic fire lion is 500 purity stones of medium quality. Now, let the auction begin." When the old man finished talking, the crowd became extremely agitated. 1,000. 1,200. 1,500. Many people were quickly raising the price, but everybody knew that the real bidding had yet to begin. How could a few thousand purity stones of medium quality be enough for a demonic fire lion? Lin Feng looked calm and indifferent on his seat. He had underestimated the price of the demonic fire lion, but after he had seen the price of the Badao, he had understood that the price of the demonic fire lion was going to be extremely high. The beautiful woman next to Lin Feng was looking at him. The eyes under that silver mask surprisingly looked extremely calm when watching this scene. "Master, how should I refer to you?" asked the beautiful girl to Lin Feng. "Refer to me?" thought Lin Feng surprised. He then immediately said, "You can call me Master Feng." "Master Feng, my name is Yishua," said the beautiful girl in a sweet voice. Lin Feng slightly nodded, and at that moment, the price of the demonic fire lion had already been raised to 3,000 purity stones. It wouldn't last too long until it reached the same price that was paid for the slave. The young Master Meng glanced at Lin Feng with a cold smile across his face. He stood up and walked towards the edge of the area reserved for all the distinguished guests. He put his hand on the railing and said, "Today, I, Meng Tsong, am determined to obtain this demonic fire lion. Nobody should try to make me unhappy, otherwise it will not end well for that person. If you don't make me unhappy, then there will not be a problem and we can be good friends after the auction." When the crowd heard what Meng Tsong said, they were surprised. What a bastard! He was suddenly threatening the entire crowd. This area was filled with noble and powerful cultivators, and yet he dared to threaten them all. They had the choice: become his friend or become his enemy. Many people were staring at Meng Tsong, but when they thought that he was from the Meng clan and was a distinguished guest for the auction, most people chose to remain silent. There was only one aristocratic family in the imperial city, and their family name was Meng. "Now, I say 3,001 purity stones of medium quality," said Meng Tsong with an indifferent smile on his face while glancing at Lin Feng. Lin Feng had dared to outbid him for the slave that he wanted, so he would prevent Lin Feng from obtaining a high price on his demonic fire lion. The old man looked at Meng Tsong from the stage. The fact that he was behaving like this had made the old man feel uncomfortable. "The demonic fire lion is now mine," said Meng Tsong, sounding proud. Suddenly, a strong and imposing voice said, 4,000 purity stones of medium quality." "Who said that?" said Meng Tsong with an extremely cold tone. As proud he was a moment ago, he wouldn't have thought that someone would dare to make him lose face. That was intolerable. Meng Tsong glanced at the crowd looking for the person who had bid higher than him. "I said that," said a cold and indifferent voice. Immediately after, a silhouette in the crowd slowly stood up. It was a man with golden hair. He looked strange, and it seemed like he was surrounded by a golden light. When the crowd saw him, their pupils shrank. It was him. Kuang Shi. Meng Tsong's eyes shrank. "What do you want?" said Kuang Shi. His golden eyes were looking directly towards the area where Meng Tsong was sitting. Meng Tsong was surprised. His facial expression had frozen. He then said, "He, you are a brilliant disciple of the Wanshou men's sect. Since you want that demonic fire lion, I will not make you lose face and I will let you have it." Kuang Shi turned around and ignored Meng Tsong, which made him even more furious. He was being humiliated over and over again. He, some laughing and giggling sounds spread in the atmosphere. While everybody was silent, this laughter sounded particularly sharp in Meng Tsong's ears. His face was disgusting to look at. He slowly turned around and looked towards Lin Feng. "What are you laughing at?" "I'm laughing at people who proudly say words that are worth less than a fart," Lin Feng said sharply. Meng Tsong was extremely aggressive and had threatened everyone within the crowd, but once Kuang Shi had come out, he had taken back everything he had said. He was even using the excuse that he just didn't want to make the other person lose face. It was just ridiculous and laughable. The Wanshou men's sect was one of the strongest sects in the Shuiyu country, and they were considered extremely strong even in the imperial city. Even though Meng Tsong's status was extraordinary, even he didn't dare to offend a member of the Wanshou men's sect. At that moment, Meng Tsong was silent. On that day, he had already been humiliated a few times by Lin Feng and had not been able to regain face. He initially wanted to get the demonic fire lion to regain face and wanted to take advantage of his social status to threaten everybody within the crowd. He hadn't thought that he would be humiliated again, but this time by Guangshi. And even after that, he had been humiliated again by Lin Feng, who loudly made fun of him. Meng Tsong had made his entire clan lose face. But nobody took his mood into consideration. The old man smiled indifferently. He was still standing on the stage and said, 4,000 purity stones of medium quality, is there anyone else who wishes to bid on the demonic fire lion? This demonic fire lion, I guarantee it will reach the Xian level in the future and could even reach the Tian level. It would become the overlord of the Shuiyu country. 4,500, said someone after hearing the old man's words, which were very tempting. Even though they probably wouldn't be able to get the lion from Guangshi, they still might get lucky. That was a demonic fire lion, who didn't want to try their luck. 5,000, said Guangshi, looking expressionless. If he wanted something, he would definitely get it. Even Meng Tsong had had to retreat because he understood Guangshi's temperament. 6,000, said an old man in a black chongpao while gnashing his teeth. 10,000, said Guangshi calmly, which stupefied the entire crowd. When he said that, he looked absolutely unperturbed. No wonder people thought that the Yunhai sect was one of the sects with the least influence in the Shuiyu country. It seems like it was really true, thought Lin Feng. The Yunhai sect was really surpassed in wealth. The Yunhai sect lacked natural resources. It didn't have any vein of the earth for its disciples to practice within. A single disciple of the Wanshou men's sect could spend 10,000 purity stones of medium quality while remaining unperturbed. The Yunhai sect still regarded purity stones of lower quality as extremely valuable. 11,000, said the old man in black chongpao, looking angry while exhaling through his gnashing teeth. His strength had already reached a bottleneck and he needed the aid of a ferocious beast. 15,000, said Guangshi. The crowd was astonished. Immediately after, some people smiled wryly. As expected, nobody could compete with that guy. 15,000 is a sum that many wealthy and noble people couldn't afford. Coming from a single person and not a clan, it was even more monstrous. Nobody wanted to continue bidding after that. Finally, the final price for the demonic fire lion ended at 15,000 purity stones of medium quality. Lin Feng was smiling. He was very satisfied by the price. He had promised 100 purity stones of medium quality to the crowd of people who had come with him. He had never thought that he would manage to get such a monstrous price. He originally thought that if he could sell it for 4,000 purity stones of medium quality, then it would be a great sum for him. He walked towards the backstage with Yi Shui. At that moment, a group of people came out with a pile of purity stones. There should be 9,300 purity stones of medium quality here. You can check yourself, said the old man while looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled. 9,000 was much more than what he had anticipated. He took the purity stones and instantly the purity stones disappeared. The old man was stupefied. He looked at Lin Feng with a strange look. I must be too old. My sight is getting blurry, said the old man while staring at Lin Feng's eyes under his silver mask. He had given so many purity stones to Lin Feng, that wasn't easy to carry. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng had a Na stone. Ordinary people didn't possess a Na stones. Lin Feng was so mysterious. Lin Feng smiled under his silver mask. The old man didn't ask much either. He pointed at Ba Dao and said, he's also yours now. Take him with you. At that moment, the old man was curious. Ba Dao had already broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer. Would he obey to Lin Feng, who was only at the 5th Ling Qi layer? Was Lin Feng strong enough? "Come with me," said Lin Feng while looking at Ba Dao and sounding indifferent. Immediately after, he left and took the lead. Ba Dao was already unchained, he looked expressionless and was following behind Lin Feng. A short moment after leaving the auction market, Lin Feng turned around and stopped walking. He coldly looked at Ba Dao through his silver mask. Ba Dao looked cold and expressionless. If a cultivation slave was unchained, he could do whatever he wished. He didn't need to obey a master. After all, a cultivation slave was a human being. Lin Feng looked calm and serene under his silver mask. Ba Dao looked calm as well and didn't look agitated in the slightest. Lin Feng looked calm and serene under his silver mask. Ba Dao looked calm as well and didn't look agitated in the slightest. Lin Feng wanted to say something and then immediately asked, "Do you want to be free?" Ba Dao frowned. The letters that were carved onto his face made him look extremely cold. Ba Dao remained silent and uncommunicative. This was his way of staying obedient. Of course he wanted to be free. Who enjoyed being someone's slave? "I'm not the one who carved these letters onto your face. I don't force people into becoming slaves," said Lin Feng while looking at Ba Dao, who remained silent. He then slowly added, "If you want to leave, you can turn around and leave now. I will not try to convince you to stay, and I will definitely not try to stop you. If you want to stay with me, then you will need to follow me." When Yishui heard what Lin Feng said, she was surprised. She was looking at Lin Feng in a strange way. He was surprisingly willing to let Ba Dao go even though he had spent over 5,000 purity stones of medium quality to buy him. 5,000 purity stones of medium quality was a great quantity and was enough to buy a great deal of strong slaves. Ba Dao seemed like he was going to say something. His bestial eyes were staring at Lin Feng. He looked pensive. "I am only going to give you this single chance to make up your mind. If you want to leave, leave now. If you want to stay with me, then you will follow me and never betray me," continued Lin Feng. He would give Ba Dao only one chance and no matter what his choice was, he would have to live with it. Ba Dao's choice would influence his future destiny. Ba Dao's facial expression became sharper. His cold and aggressive eyes were intensely staring at Lin Feng through the silver mask. Lin Feng's eyes looked as calm as before. Lin Feng could lose 5,000 purity stones of medium quality if Ba Dao left him, but if he decided to stay with Lin Feng, he would have to follow Lin Feng for the rest of his life and would not be allowed to regret his choice. Destiny often depends on choices. If Lin Feng hadn't bought him at the auction, then Ba Dao would still have been a slave, but now, Lin Feng was giving him the opportunity to regain his freedom. However, if he decided to stay, then he must follow Lin Feng and never betray him. Lin Feng couldn't afford spending so many purity stones on someone who would only cause him trouble in the future, as his virtue had limits. Lin Feng and Ba Dao were staring at each other. Their expressions were as sharp as blades, and the atmosphere was incredibly intense. In the atmosphere surrounding them, a cold and deadly qi filled the air. Yishui started shivering just from the atmosphere created by these two staring at each other. How cold! That coldness didn't make a person's body feel cold though, the cold penetrated deep into the soul. "I will follow you, and I will never betray you," said Ba Dao after having remained silent for a while. His sharp and cold expression vanished. His voice was soft, and he was nodding to Lin Feng. "All right," said Lin Feng while smiling. Lin Feng had spent over 5,000 purity stones for this slave. If he had decided not to stay with him, then Lin Feng would be slightly disappointed. Now that Ba Dao had decided to stay with him, it was obviously the best outcome for Lin Feng. Remember what you said and make sure to never go back on your words. You could have had your freedom, but you chose to stay. You chose to stay and follow me. Since it's that way, If you betray me in the future, I will be forced to punish you, said Lin Feng coldly. The air around him became much colder too. Ba Dao remained silent and nodded. He understood what Lin Feng meant. On that day, if Lin Feng hadn't been there, he would have been sold to someone else. If somebody else had bought him, then they would have wanted to exploit him as a slave, but Lin Feng had given him his freedom. Lin Feng wasn't treating him like a slave and gave him a choice. Lin Feng was treating him like he would anyone else, and he was not being treated like a slave. Ba Dao was just a slave. He had his name carved into his face. If he had chosen to leave Lin Feng, then no matter where he went, he would still be treated like a slave. People would have tried to capture him again, and he would have never been able to break free. If he was to gain his freedom, he would never be able to show his face again. The markings on his face had made him a slave, and that is how people would treat him. Therefore, the choice that Lin Feng had given to Ba Dao was to follow Lin Feng, who would not treat him as a slave, or attempt to find a place which would treat him as mercifully as Lin Feng. Since it was Ba Dao's decision and he had been given the right to choose, he would never be able to regret his choice. He had chosen his destiny for himself. Lin Feng had not attempted to influence his decision. "Let's go," said Lin Feng while starting to walk. Yi Shui and Ba Dao quickly followed behind him. At that moment, Ba Dao started walking slightly faster, and he moved close to Lin Feng without completely catching up and said from behind, "There are some people who are following us." "I know," said Lin Feng, who sounded indifferent and didn't even turn his head. Ba Dao looked at him in a strange way. Yi Shui's heart was also beating faster. She couldn't help but turn her head around. She just saw that about 100 meters away, a man in gray robes was following them while glaring at the group. He didn't even try to hide, acting as if he didn't care about being spotted by them. "It's him," said the beautiful Yi Shui. The man behind them was the man in gray robes who was with Meng Tsong before. "Ignore him," said Lin Feng sounding indifferent. Yi Shui turned around. She couldn't understand how Lin Feng could remain so indifferent. She found it uncomfortable. He's broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer. His blood vessels are very strong and he is filled with power. The qi that he keeps releasing is very strong and thick. A deadly qi is emerging from his body as well. He must be very used to killing, so he will be very hard to defeat. It would be very difficult for me to fight against him, and if the battle lasts for too long, then I would probably lose, said Ba Dao in a low voice. Ba Dao was surprisingly able to determine other people's strength and abilities only by looking at them. Lin Feng was stupefied. He looked at Ba Dao with an incredibly strange face. "Well, do you know how strong I am?" asked Lin Feng. 5th Ling Qi layer. You have a strong and thick qi. Your blood vessels are extremely vigorous. Besides, it seems like all the energy within your body is in perfect fusion. If I am not mistaken, it seems like you understand sword force to an extremely profound level. Any ordinary cultivator of the 6th Ling Qi layer would be unable to defeat you and maybe even myself. I would not guarantee that I could defeat you in a fight. Ba Dao said these words very calmly, which stupefied Lin Feng. It seemed like when he was describing the strength of the man in gray robes, it was very precise. With only a glance, Ba Dao could clearly determine a person's actual strength before actually fighting against them. Yi Shui was looking at Lin Feng in a strange way. He had just broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer, and he surprisingly had dared to buy a slave of the 6th Ling Qi layer. Besides, he looked extremely confident and careless. "We'll solve the problem." Lin Feng didn't speak much more. After that simple sentence, he started to accelerate his pace and kept walking forwards. Besides Lin Feng and the two others, the man in gray robes was surprised and then immediately smiled coldly. He said, "I can easily catch up with you. Do you think that you can escape?" Lin Feng was walking with a slave of the 6th Ling Qi layer and had over 9,000 purity stones of medium quality on him. This was definitely tempting. The man in gray robes started walking on the tips of his toes. His entire body looked extremely skillful and agile while floating over the street like a gentle breeze. He was moving closer and closer to Lin Feng. But at that moment, Lin Feng and the two others changed their direction and went inside a restaurant. The man in the gray robes frowned. He then started walking even faster and finally arrived at the restaurant. He looked inside the restaurant but didn't see Lin Feng and the others. First floor. The man in the gray robes raised his head and looked at the flight of stairs when he saw a handsome young man standing around the stairs with a smile on his face. "Get lost," said the man in the gray robes while walking towards the flight of stairs and moving past the handsome smiling boy. While the man in the gray robes was walking up the stairs, a silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs. That person was holding a long dagger. An extremely strong and sharp chi was emerging from it. Blade chi filled the atmosphere and an overwhelming blade force was present, which made the people in the restaurant shrink back in fear. What sharp blade chi, and he is actually using blade force. When the man in gray robes saw Ba Dao, he smiled coldly and said, "Ba Dao, join our young master Meng, he will be sure to treat you well. There is no need to bring about your own destruction." Ba Dao ignored what the man in gray robes said and raised his long dagger into the air. An extremely sharp force was being released from it. While force was continuously flowing from his dagger, the atmosphere continued vibrating under the pressure. Pish! The man in the gray robes jumped into the air. Ba Dao's dagger released a magnificent light, which rushed through the air like a meteor. The mark of a blade suddenly appeared where the man in gray robes once stood. A rumbling noise spread down the flight of stairs. Suddenly, the rumbling noise stopped. The man in the gray robes saw the power of that strike and then shouted, "Die!" While shouting toward Ba Dao, the man in the gray robes made a quick movement with his hands. An incredibly strong force emerged from his hands and moved straight towards Ba Dao's dagger. Under the pressure of the force released by the man in gray robes, Ba Dao's body was slowly being pushed down. The man in gray robes raised his hand and was about to launch an attack, but at that moment, he had the sensation that something dangerous was behind him. His heart started to beat faster. He suddenly had the impression that he hadn't been vigilant enough and it had almost cost him his life. He turned around and immediately saw the handsome young man he had seen a moment ago. He had forgotten all about him, but at that moment, the young man's black eyes looked expressionless and cold. They were filled with endless desolation. His heart cruelly twitched once again. "It's him! It's him!" The heart of the man in gray robes was unceasingly pounding. He finally understood that he had forgotten about someone. He had surprisingly forgotten his initial target, Lin Feng. It was the friendly-looking and handsome young man he had just encountered at the bottom of stairs. At that moment, blade force filled the atmosphere once again. It seemed like the blade force was lacerating the entire atmosphere. The man in the gray robes was still floating mid-air. He did not know what to do, no matter if it was Ba Dao's extreme strength or the young man with the expressionless eyes. He had the feeling that both were extremely dangerous. He suddenly had an idea and finally came to a decision. Ba Dao, who had broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer, was the one who scared him the most. If Ba Dao was behind him, then it would be way too dangerous. 81 people of the 6th Ling Qi layer had died by Ba Dao's hands. He used to be a slave at the prisoner arena, where his life was at stake during each battle. He was not someone who could be taken lightly. Ah! The man in the gray robes was strongly shaking. His robes were fluttering in the air. His rigid body suddenly released a violent and deadly chi. The extremely strong attack of the man in the gray robes moved through the air straight towards Ba Dao. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The entire restaurant was shaking. The force that was released by the two fighters was ripping the ornaments in the restaurant and the furniture was being crushed. People were moving farther away from the fight. The tables and chairs where they were sitting were breaking apart and some even exploded under the pressure. The blade force was extremely cold. Under the pressure of Ba Dao's dagger, the man in the gray robes progressively moved back down the stairs. He glanced towards Lin Feng and saw that Lin Feng was moving towards him as well. He looked as cold and expressionless, which sent shivers down the man's spine. "Heavy mountain fist," shouted the man in the grey robes. He surprisingly still had the ability to attack Lin Feng from such a dangerous position. His fist attack was extremely powerful. At that moment, he had a strange and evil expression within his eyes. Psh. At that moment, a clear and distinct sound spread through the atmosphere. It was as if something was being cut apart. The man in the grey robes wanted to move but couldn't. The forearm of the man in the grey robes was firmly being held by Lin Feng and his other hand was holding a mysterious dagger. The glow that it was diffusing couldn't be seen because the blade of that dagger had already penetrated into the throat of the man in the grey robes. Only the handle of the mysterious dagger could be seen. The eyes of the man in the grey robes were still looking at Lin Feng's incomplete shadow. That attack had been so quick. How could he possibly be that quick? Besides, how could he dodge his fist attack so easily? "In your next life, you should serve a righteous person," said Lin Feng coldly while pulling his mysterious dagger out of the man's throat. Blood poured onto the ground. The man's throat immediately collapsed and blood gushed forth. Even though he was dead, both his eyes were still open as if he was unable to close his eyes in death and pass on peacefully. Lin Feng wiped the blood from his dagger and put it away. His facial expression became cold and indifferent once again. He was calmly looking at the man's corpse. That man was of the 7th Qi layer. He was extremely powerful. If Ba Dao hadn't been there to distract him, then Lin Feng would have never been able to defeat him so easily. At that moment, Ba Dao and Yi Shui moved down the stairs. They looked at Lin Feng's handsome face and were deeply moved. What a genius! Lin Feng was only about 17 years old, but his strength was monstrous. He had killed the man with a single deadly strike. He had immediately gone for the man's vitals. Ba Dao knew he had become powerful over time. He had evolved in an environment full of blood and fighting. That's how he had become so powerful. But Lin Feng, his qi and blade force were very dense and his fighting abilities were extremely high. His attacks were almost masterful. A light also flashed in Yi Shui's eyes. A moment before, she thought that Lin Feng was weak because he had only broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer, but at that moment, she didn't have the same impression any longer. She also hadn't thought that such a handsome face was hiding under the silver mask, which made her unable to break her gaze from Lin Feng. She couldn't look anywhere else. "Let's go," said Lin Feng. After saying that, he started walking and left the restaurant. Ba Dao and Yi Shui followed behind him like before. They were closely following Lin Feng. Behind them there was only a corpse lying on the ground in the restaurant. In the blink of an eye, a strong cultivator of the 7th Ling Qi layer had been slaughtered by 2 people who were weaker than him, in the presence of the entire restaurant. No matter if it was the slave with the name Ba Dao marked on his face or the handsome and delicate-looking young man, the crowd just had the impression that they had just dreamt what had happened. Suddenly, a black silhouette appeared and moved inside the restaurant. The crowd was surprised again. That black silhouette hadn't emitted any noise, just like a ghost or a spirit. It had just appeared in front of them. Such a thing was terrifying. "He died," said the mysterious silhouette. When the black silhouette saw the corpse on the floor, it looked irresolute. The hand of the black silhouette moved and a strong energy was released. It enveloped the dead body and immediately the body disappeared. The entire crowd was incredibly surprised. A mixture of veneration and dread-filled thoughts rushed through the minds of the onlookers. Xian Qi layer. That black silhouette was of the Xian Qi layer and seemed to have been following the people from a moment before. The black silhouette flickered and disappeared from the crowd's vision. A short instant later, it appeared outside of the restaurant. It was looking into the distance, then the silhouette flickered again and it disappeared from that location. Suddenly, the black silhouette was surprised and stopped moving. Because at that moment, there was a calm-looking person who had blocked the path of the black silhouette. That person was whiter than snow and it was floating in the air like a celestial being. It was a woman and the black silhouette could only see her back. Even if one wanted to pass, it seemed impossible. She looked like a glacier separating him from his desired location. How monstrous! The black silhouette could determine that that holy and pure silhouette was an extremely strong cultivator of the Xian Qi layer. She was very dangerous. You followed us for such a long time. Now you have finally stopped. That holy and pure silhouette slowly turned around. Her face was covered by a fine veil. People could only guess what was underneath and would be very eager to gaze under the veil. The black silhouette hadn't been so anxious for a very long time, but at that moment his heart was pounding inside his chest. Breathtaking, stunning. At that moment, a stunning body was slowly moving towards the black silhouette. The atmosphere was becoming colder and colder. Following every single movement, a freezing coldness invaded the atmosphere. The atmosphere around that person was covered with frost. That was a very strange coldness. Even strong cultivators who were far away were looking in that direction, gasping in astonishment. The expression of the black silhouette seemed to have solidified and a shiver ran down his spine. The silhouette transformed and shot away like an arrow being released from a bow. He released a violent energy from his hand as he retreated. Ice Heart. The white silhouette just said these two words. At that moment, the body of the black silhouette started shaking from head to toe. These two words seemed to have encircled his heart with a layer of ice as if it was trapped by the ice. An ice-cold qi was released in the atmosphere. The black silhouette resisted the extreme coldness. The energy that had been released from his hand had turned white and had frozen inside the atmosphere. This scene looked like a dream. Kacha, kacha. The ice in the atmosphere was growing thicker and thicker. It seemed like the entire atmosphere was covered with a layer of ice. The energy emerging from the hand of the black silhouette were bombarding against the white ice. But that freezing white ice seemed to be endless, as if the entire world belonged to this ice. Ice reigns over the world. A cold and detached voice came from that stunning silhouette. The entire atmosphere suddenly froze solid and there was not a movement to be seen. The black silhouette suddenly sensed an extreme coldness invade his body. He quickly thrust his palm forward. A pure energy started pouring out from the black silhouette's palm. But in that world of ice, everything seemed to belong to the ice. The ice was becoming thicker and thicker. It seemed like the entire world was turning into a single block of ice, oppressing the body of the black silhouette. Finally, his body and heart were completely frozen. What did they see? That world of ice was actually a gigantic block of ice as big as a house. Such a thing seemed like a dream. After a long time, that block of ice finally started to crack and rapidly started melting under the hot sun. Ice-cold water started to flow down onto the ground. In the middle, there was a black silhouette which had been frozen in the moment of its death. This person was already long dead but had been frozen in the scene of their own death. That black silhouette had once been an extremely strong cultivator of the Xian Qi layer, but at that moment, it was only a frozen corpse. It was silent and breathless, it was completely lifeless. Lin Feng had no idea what had happened after he had left the restaurant. Even though he had a little bit of a sixth sense, he had never sensed that a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer was following him. Lin Feng had no idea what had happened after he had left the restaurant. Even though he had a little bit of a sixth sense, he had never sensed that a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer was following him. Lin Feng hadn't realized that Meng Qing was also following him the whole time. She had been following him since the moment when he left the Celestial Academy. She had never once left his side. Lin Feng had put on his silver mask again, which gave him a majestic and cold appearance. He wasn't the only one for whom that was the case, it was the same for Ba Dao, who was on his side, who was now wearing a bronze mask. Ba Dao looked ferocious and savage, especially when wearing the bronze mask. Ba Dao, except for auctions and fights to the death, Are there other places where cultivation slaves of the prisoner arena end up? Asked Lin Feng while walking down the street. Yes, muttered Ba Dao irresolutely. He then immediately nodded and said, no need to talk about those who have already died in the arena. The ones who are docile and obedient enough are allowed to stay inside their cages to be sold. Those who aren't sold at an auction will eventually be sent to the black market. Many of them are sold on the black market to people who need cultivation slaves. Lin Feng looked at Ba Dao. It was clear that he was very stubborn and hardly the docile type. Where can we buy slaves? Asked Lin Feng. I don't know, replied Ba Dao while shaking his head. He then added, I have never been a witness to slaves being bought before. I am just familiar with what happened to me. Lin Feng looked pensive. Then, Yishui, who was standing on his side, said, there is a slave exchange where you can purchase slaves, it's widely known in this district. The wealthy and noble cultivators go to the slave exchange when they need slaves. They can exchange purity stones or other items and receive slaves. Exchange? Lin Feng was surprised. Surprisingly, there were places called slave exchanges. Yishui, take me to the slave exchange, said Lin Feng indifferently. Yishui was surprised. She looked at Lin Feng and immediately nodded, all right. They immediately started walking. Soon, they had arrived at the slave exchange. Lin Feng could already see the slave exchange from a distance, as the roads of the city were vast and wide. When he saw the slave exchange, his pupils shrank. On both sides of the road, there was a large number of cages with slaves inside. Their powerful masters were sitting there looking indifferent, waiting for people to come and buy their slaves. In that place, slaves were like animals. There was nothing humane about the slave exchange. These slaves were war prisoners, prisoners sentenced to death, or people who had offended an influential clan. For example, those who had survived the massacre of the Yunhai sect had been turned into slaves by Duan Tianlang. These survivors were humiliated and maltreated to the extent that they wished that they could die. Many of them did. Besides, the exchange marketplace was very busy. People were unceasingly walking on the central road and buying slaves. There were some very strong slaves and they belonged to the noble families that had purchased them. Lin Feng and the two others entered the slave exchange. They glanced at all the cages on both sides. There were all sorts of slaves, skinny ones as well as robust ones. There were also extremely attractive male and female slaves. The nobles of the city who were fond of beauties could buy them in order to enjoy various pleasures. Master Feng, this area is for slaves who are mainly at the Qi layer. Slaves of the Ling Qi layer are very expensive. The large clans of the imperial city have the monopoly over them. Don't even give them a look. At that moment, Yishui explained these things to Lin Feng. She didn't know why Lin Feng would want to come to that place. However, if Lin Feng was going to buy slaves, then it was no use to look at slaves of the Qi layer. Alright, let's go and see the slaves of the Ling Qi layer, replied Lin Feng. He started walking again, but he didn't feel comfortable, and he actually felt very uneasy seeing the scenes around him. Each and every slave was staring at their group. It was clear that these slaves had been mistreated, and the master looked truly disgusting. This was the impurity of the world. Shortly after, they arrived at the middle of the slave exchange. It didn't look like the outside area at all. While the rest of the exchange was like a market, the area here was a small ancient castle. Master, this is the biggest place to exchange slaves. 80% of them are slaves of the Ling Qi layer. Yishui whispered these words into Lin Feng's ears. Outside of the ancient castle, a silhouette was intensely staring at Lin Feng and the others. When a slave merchant heard Yishui call Lin Feng Master Feng, he quickly interrupted, Master, did you come here to purchase slaves? I can guarantee you that you will find very high-quality slaves here. Show me, said Lin Feng indifferently. His eyes under his silver mask were fearless. As you wish, master. Please follow me, said the slave merchant sounding extremely polite while smiling. Lin Feng and the two others entered the building, which looked like a small fortress. The interior was huge. Only half of the cages were locked while others had been left open. The interior was full of slaves. They were all sitting on the floor looking sluggish. When they saw Lin Feng enter, a deadly qi started invading the entire atmosphere. "Master, you can choose one from here. The number of chains that they have on their body represents their strength. If they have one chain, it means that they have broken through to the first Ling Qi layer, or if they have 5 chains, it means that they have broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer," said the slave merchant to Lin Feng. Lin Feng could look at the slaves and determine their strength depending on the number of chains on their body without them having to move. There are 200 slaves of the Ling Qi layer here. The strongest ones are at the 6th Ling Qi layer. Their masters must be from the influential clans, thought Lin Feng as he roughly glanced at the slaves. There were about 200 slaves, and they had all broken through to the Ling Qi layer. Besides, they were all quite young. If they had all been outside slavery, they would have definitely been an influential power. They could have even composed a small sect. "Master, don't worry. All of them have come from the prisoner arena." Amongst them, some were disciples of the Yunhai sect, which was destroyed by Duan Tianlang. Many of them used to be elite disciples or even core disciples. There is absolutely no chance for you to be disappointed. The slave merchant was talking attentively. Lin Feng was greatly astonished. Disciples of the Yunhai sect? He had finally found some of them. Last time, Lin Feng had heard that many people of Yunhai sect had ended up at the prisoner arena. He was hoping to find some of the former disciples of the Yunhai sect, which is why he had come to this place. "I plan to go hunt some extremely strong ferocious beasts in the forest, and for that, I need slaves to open the way. It seems like I ended up in the perfect place." Lin Feng was smiling. All these slaves looked at him with a cold glare. He wanted them to open the way for a strong ferocious beast. This meant that they were all going to be sacrificed. What a bastard! He. "Master, you really came at the right moment," said the slave merchant while smiling. In his heart, the slave merchant was cursing Lin Feng. He didn't know which noble clan he was from, but he was stupid enough to tell the slaves his plans for them. "What is the price for the slaves in here?" asked Lin Feng. Slaves of the first Ling Qi layer are 10 purity stones of medium quality, those of the second Ling Qi layer are 30, those of the third Ling Qi layer are 80, those of the fourth Ling Qi layer are 200, those of the fifth Ling Qi layer are 500, and those of the sixth Ling Qi layer are 1000. Lin Feng slightly nodded. He looked at all the slaves and said, "Those who were the former disciples of the Yunhai sect can serve my purpose. Who will be coming with me?" When the slave merchant heard him, he cursed him again. What an idiot! Even the slaves were looking at Lin Feng indifferently. There was no solution. Who would be willing to go with him? It wasn't written on any of their faces that they had once been disciples of the Yunhai sect. If they didn't want to leave, they didn't need to. If they didn't say that they belonged to the Yunhai sect, who would even know? Even Ba Dao and Yishui didn't understand Lin Feng's actions. But Lin Feng looked as calm and indifferent as before. He took out a ring and placed it onto his finger. Lin Feng had taken out a ring which looked ordinary, but when the slaves saw it, they were stupefied. That ring looked ordinary, but amongst these slaves, many of them had already seen it. It had belonged to the patriarch of the Yunhai sect, Nan Gongling. They had already seen it on his finger many times. Each and every single disciple of the Yunhai sect stood up and stared at Lin Feng, or more precisely, at his ring. They couldn't understand what was happening. Each and every single disciple of the Yunhai sect stood up and stared at Lin Feng, or more precisely, at his ring. They couldn't understand what was happening. But at that moment, Lin Feng put his hand on his waist and said to the slaves, "Those willing to follow me, stand up." The hearts of these Yunhai sect disciples were pounding. They were stupefied. Flashes of hope appeared in their eyes. That was the patriarch's ring. Lin Feng might be a disciple of the Yunhai sect, just like them. I am willing to follow you. At that moment, a silhouette stood up and walked towards the edge of his cell. He looked excited. I am willing to follow you. I also want to follow you. More and more people were standing up and expressing themselves. The whole situation stupefied the slave merchant. He was deeply surprised by the actions of these slaves. Why were so many people willing to follow Lin Feng? They would certainly bring about their own destruction. Could it be that they found living here so horrible that they had chosen death? Ba Dao and Yi Shui were astonished too and looked at Lin Feng, trying to get a hint of what was happening. Lin Feng had just said that he was looking for slaves to clear the path against some ferocious beasts. How could they be so willing to go with him? More than 30 slaves had stood up and were standing at the entrance of their cells. Lin Feng sighed with mixed emotions. The number of people who had managed to survive that day was quite important. They hadn't been killed on the spot, but their lives was far from being one of happiness. They had been made into slaves and a great number of them had died in the prisoner arena. There were also many people that had been sold in the slave exchange previously. Release them, I want to buy all of them, said Lin Feng indifferently. A light flashed in the slave merchant's eyes and he slightly nodded. Even though he didn't understand what was happening, he couldn't deny that someone buying so many slaves at once was a large amount of business. Are you sure that you want me to release all of these slaves? At that moment, the slave merchant wasn't smiling any longer and was no longer trying to sell his slaves. He looked solemn and calm as if it was a completely different person. Lin Feng looked at the slave merchant in a strange way but, immediately after, was relieved. The slave merchant was concerned that Lin Feng wasn't strong enough and something bad would happen to him if he was unable to control the slaves. Yes, I am. Release them, said Lin Feng while nodding. It was clear to him that the slave merchant was worried about him not being strong enough, which would be problematic if he did not have the power to control all of these slaves. But did Lin Feng need to keep them under control? Since you have insisted, I will release them, said the slave merchant while nodding. The slave merchant moved to the large cell in which most of the slaves were inside and unlocked it. He then said, those willing to follow him, come out one by one. If you dare do something suspicious, you will die. When the slave merchant finished talking, a deadly energy emerged from his body and spread into the air. A light flashed in Lin Feng's eyes. How powerful! The slave merchant had broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer. It seemed like this person was a completely different person from the one a moment before. The slaves had their heads down and did not look anyone in the eyes. They were all moving out of the cell one by one so that each person could fit through the small door. Their hearts were pounding out of excitement. Very quickly, 32 people were standing by Lin Feng's side. How many purity stones? Calmly asked Lin Feng. 8 slaves of the 1st Ling Qi layer, 9 slaves of the 2nd Ling Qi layer, 7 slaves of the 3rd Ling Qi layer, 5 of the 4th Ling Qi layer, 3 of the 5th Ling Qi layer and none of the 6th Ling Qi layer. That's 3,400 purity stones of medium quality, said the slave merchant after having counting the total in his head. Lin Feng slightly nodded. A light flashed and at that moment, a thick pure qi emerged. In Lin Feng's hand appeared a huge number of purity stones. He can store things in a pocket of space. The crowd was stupefied. Lin Feng surprisingly could store things into a special pocket. That didn't seem like an easy thing for one to achieve. You can count them if you would like. Lin Feng put all the purity stones on the ground while saying this. The slave merchant indifferently glanced at the ground and then immediately said while smiling, no need to count. You can leave with your slaves now. All right, said Lin Feng while slightly nodding. He turned around, looked at the slaves and said, come with me. When Lin Feng finished talking, he started walking. Those 32 slaves followed behind him as a group. Everybody's pace was surprisingly identical and their formation was clear and neat, which surprised everybody that saw. It didn't seem like that group of people came from the slave exchange at all. The way they moved in formation was way too strange. They looked like Lin Feng's subordinates, calmly following behind him. The slave merchant of the slave market looked at the backs of the departing slaves and a thought flashed through his mind. He then said, "Master, walk slowly." Walking on the large road with 32 slaves would obviously attract everybody's attention. How could people outside not see the marks that the slaves had on their faces? Besides, they were still within the slave exchange. If they were outside, then they would draw even more people's attention. In a mansion not far from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, Lin Feng, Ba Dao, Yi Shui and 32 slaves were cultivating. The place they were training was a rocky terrain. There was a pavilion in the middle with a small bridge, flowing water and even a small lake. This was the mansion that Lin Feng just recently bought. He spent 500 purity stones of medium quality to buy the mansion, which was incredibly expensive. Lin Feng needed a place for the slaves to stay. The Celestial Academy wasn't his after all. Even if he could enjoy all the benefits of the academy, he couldn't draw everybody's attention by walking in with so many slaves following him. That would not have been appropriate. Each and every slave from the Yunhai sect was looking at Lin Feng. They were curious to know who he was. They were very troubled by not knowing who it was under the mask. They all wanted that mask to be removed so they could see the face underneath. Who could be wearing the Patriarch's ring? Lin Feng calmly glanced at the crowd and said, "You've gone through a lot of hardships." While talking, he put his hand on his mask. The heart of the people in the crowd started beating faster. Lin Feng then slowly took off his mask. Boom! Seeing Lin Feng's face made the group completely shocked. Everybody knew the young man, who was wearing the Patriarch's ring. It was Lin Feng. That was the unique, exceptional and frivolous Lin Feng. Back in the days of the Yunhai sect, Lin Feng had stood out because he had killed the elite disciples and he defeated top-ranking elite disciple, Wen Renyan. He was like a conquering hero. In the life and death arena, he had made the Patriarch regret his actions and reflect upon his mistakes. How imposing was he when reprimanding the Patriarch? Lin Feng had become a source of hope for the future of the Yunhai sect. Everybody thought that, sooner or later, Lin Feng would make the Yunhai sect rise again to new heights and regain its place in the Shuiyu country. But the Yunhai sect, instead, had been the victim of a tragedy. And at that moment, they could see Lin Feng again. Their hearts were beating from just looking at the wonderful disciple of the Yunhai sect standing there alive. It was the young man who had refused Duan Tianlang's offer because he stayed true to his own convictions. They were infinitely touched and surprised by his actions. Lin Feng was still alive. Lin Feng had freed them from their slave status and took them from the slave exchange. They wouldn't have to live as slaves again and could regain their humanity. They wouldn't be enduring pain and humiliation on a daily basis. No need to look at me that way and no need to be too excited either. Don't forget that your faces still have the mark of the slave carved into them. Your hearts are still filled with an endless shame, said Lin Feng when he saw that the crowd was growing excited. Lin Feng's coldness quickly ended the excited feelings that had begun. That's right, they still had the mark of a slave carved into their face, so they still had the status of slave. Have you forgotten how our sect was destroyed? How you forgotten the people who carved these letters into your faces, said Lin Feng coldly. The crowd was filled with hatred. They hated Duan Tianlang. He was the one who had destroyed the Yunhai sect. They were marked as slaves because of him. He had made them become slaves. Because the Yunhai sect was weak, it was destroyed. It didn't have the power to even defend itself. As far as you are concerned, you are weak, that is why you have the mark of a slave carved onto your face. This is why you were humiliated each day, said Lin Feng. He then slowly added, if you do not have enough strength you will never break free from your status as a slave. You will, as before, remain slaves and could even get taken away just like an animal. Lin Feng's words were not pleasant to hear, but every single sentence made their heart beat even faster. Lin Feng was right though, if their strength didn't increase, They would never be able to change their destiny. If you are sick of being bullied and humiliated, if you want to change your destiny and not be a slave for your entire life, if you want to hold a festival to celebrate the end of your past hardships and humiliations, there is only one way, said Lin Feng, whose voice was becoming louder and louder, while looking at everyone in the crowd. He then spat out the following words: "Become stronger. Unceasingly stronger. Only the strong can change their destiny." Become stronger. All of these Yunhai sect disciples were turning red, with anger boiling in their hearts. Lin Feng was right. If the Yunhai sect had been strong, who would have been able to destroy it? If they were strong enough, they would have never had the mark of a slave carved into their faces. Become stronger. All of these Yunhai sect disciples were turning red, with anger boiling in their hearts. Lin Feng was right. If the Yunhai sect had been strong, who would have been able to destroy it? If they were strong enough, they would have never had the mark of a slave carved into their faces. Exceptionally strong cultivators could annihilate a whole sect and even a country. This is what only the really strong cultivators could do. They could shake both heaven and earth. However, the weak of the world could only get bullied to the extent that they would become slaves and be treated like animals. This was the fate of the weak Yunhai sect. Lin Feng looked at the crowd and felt that his words had the desired effect. They were all clenching their fists to the extent that their tendons could be seen on their arms. Their hearts had been filled with shame. Now they truly knew what the words humiliation and shame meant. They understood that, in this world, the weak would always be at the mercy of the strong. If their determination and willpower became stronger, then they would also grow much stronger too. Suddenly a few agility techniques and martial skills appeared with a wave of Lin Feng's hand. They were from the temple of the Yunhai sect. Now that he had become the patriarch, he needed to help the disciples become stronger, so they needed to have access to these skills. Nan Gongling, before dying, appointed me as the new patriarch of the Yunhai sect. All of these martial skills and agility techniques are at the Xian level. You can look for a few which would be suitable for you. Once you find one, just go and practice it to perfection. Lin Feng laid these skills and agility techniques on the floor. Everybody was stupefied. Martial skills and agility techniques were extremely attractive to any cultivator. A few of the disciples rushed towards the agility techniques and martial skills to choose, but many people stayed in their initial position while staring at Lin Feng. Get back! Lin Feng moved forwards and released a burst of qi and force into the air, which surprised the people who had already rushed forward to greedily choose their own skills. They all raised their head and looked at Lin Feng. Damn it, I said get back! Lin Feng's pupils shrank. He looked extremely cold. This group of disciples didn't understand why Lin Feng was losing his temper, but they all moved back towards the other disciples who were patiently waiting. Patriarch. Amongst those who hadn't moved a moment before, there were some who suddenly decided to bow and give face to Lin Feng. The ones who rushed forward understood and bowed to Lin Feng as well and said, Patriarch. Lin Feng coldly looked at the crowd and said indifferently, You have all disappointed me. When they heard him, the crowd was stupefied. I don't want to hear you all call me Patriarch. I just want to see how many of you can control your hearts when faced with greed. Someone who is just interested in satisfying their own interest and their own greed will never be able to gain a strong heart. They will never take into consideration the others around them and will only work to satisfy their own desires. I'm telling you, you're a bunch of idiots. Lin Feng said very impolitely, I don't know if it's because you've been slaves for too long, but some of you no longer have honor and integrity. Do you think that I released you so you could greedily help yourselves to skills without showing the slightest bit of respect or consideration? Do you think that I wanted to hear you shout, Patriarch, to satisfy my own ego? Do you think I want people who will only call me Patriarch because I am the one with the power? What happens if the person with power changes? You all disappoint me. Lin Feng repeated himself again. The cheeks of the Yunhai sect disciples who were bowing to Lin Feng felt like they were burning. Do you think I owe you something? I spent thousands of purity stones to buy your freedom. Could it be that you think I did this so you could continue to think of your own interests? Do you think I bought you so you could continue without a sense of integrity and honor? Do you think I need people who forget to show gratitude to those who show them kindness? If I teach you to only care about yourself and how to grow stronger, then in the future, you might just end up selling out your comrades or even me. If I taught you that, then you would be no better than the people who made you slaves. Lin Feng stared at the crowd and continued, of course, because you have been living like animals, you may have forgotten what it is to act like a decent person. What I said just now is only to remind you of what it means to be a good person. You need to remember that in the future you will need to think about others and be selfless, or you may end up dead in the future. Remember that I don't want to hear any bullshit, and I have heard enough from moronic people already. The people in the crowd looked at Lin Feng and slightly shook their heads. They had realized that their hearts had truly started to become selfish. Remember that you will be judged on your own choices, said Lin Feng. Immediately after, he turned around and started walking away while saying, you can choose from any of the martial skills and agility techniques on the ground. You are not allowed to leave the pavilion, use that time to meditate and train. In 3 months' time, I will come back. Lin Feng started leaving while Yi Shui and Ba Dao were calmly following behind him. Ba Dao, you stay here too, said Lin Feng to Ba Dao. A martial skill appeared in Lin Feng's hand and he handed it over to Ba Dao. He then said with a soft tone, Ba Dao, that martial skill is perfect for you. Take it, learn it and practice it. If any of them try to run away after receiving their skills, kill them. When Lin Feng said the word kill, a strong killing intent could be felt from him. Ba Dao and Yi Shui were stupefied when looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked expressionless and continued to walk, leaving the mansion. Lin Feng only thought about the future of the Yunhai sect from the beginning. This world was definitely a selfish and cruel world. These people were the former disciples of the Yunhai sect. He had spent a fortune of purity stones to change their fate and had given them agility techniques and martial skills for only one reason, the Yunhai sect. Lin Feng had saved them, but if they had chose to run away with the skills or continue to live selfishly, then Lin Feng would kill them. If they showed no gratitude and had no honor, then he would remove them. If they had chosen to run away and steal from the Yunhai sect, then they should have thought about it. They would have known they were betraying the mercy of Lin Feng and the Yunhai sect itself. Even if they were former disciples of the Yunhai sect, why would Lin Feng need people who only thought selfishly and did not care about the Yunhai sect or the kindness that Lin Feng had shown them? The former disciples in the mansion were the new generation of the Yunhai sect. Lin Feng wasn't going to abandon them, but he was not going to let his sect be corrupted. Ba Dao, who had stayed behind, was watching Lin Feng's back as he left. He then started looking at the martial skill that Lin Feng had given to him. It made him shiver. Tyrannical Blade. A blade attack of pure energy, D-level martial skill of lower quality. Pure energy is released from the user in the form of blade which annihilates anything in its path. Tyrannical Blade. D-level martial skill of lower quality. Ba Dao whispered these words to himself as if he did not believe it. That martial skill seemed to be perfect for him. Besides, it was a terrifying technique of the D level. Ba Dao raised his head again and looked at Lin Feng's back. Lin Feng's heart was mysterious and unfathomable, but one thing was sure, he was an extremely intelligent person and he definitely had a very good nature. He had confidently given that martial skill to Ba Dao. He had faith in Ba Dao and trusted him, even though they had spent such a small amount of time together. Ba Dao was very moved by the trust that Lin Feng had shown him. He could never repay the kindness which Lin Feng continued to show him. Lin Feng returned to the Celestial Academy. He first brought Yi Shui to a suitable living quarters and then immediately went to the peach orchard where he could hear a pleasant zither melody playing. Lin Feng had said 3 months to the slaves. This was not just for their cultivation but his as well. He wasn't going to forget his own cultivation for his battle against Heimo. At that moment, Lin Feng had broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer, and with his current power, he could defeat cultivators of the 6th Ling Qi layer. But Mo was at the peak of the 6th Ling Chi layer. At the academy, those of a similar level couldn't even compete with him. Even many cultivators at the 7th Chi layer didn't dare to fight against him. Mo was extremely powerful and could cross the gap in power between the layers. Mo was one of the 10 strongest students of the Celestial Academy, and considering his talent, that was a well-deserved title. Besides, who could say that Mo hadn't also become much stronger in these 3 months? Was he supposed to stay the same level for Lin Feng to catch up? Lin Feng's strength wasn't sufficient. He lacked in many areas compared to Mo. Mo could defeat a cultivator of the 7th Ling Chi layer with confidence, but Lin Feng would come close to death when fighting against one. He had defeated 2 cultivators of the 7th Chi layer, however one had greatly injured him and the other had fought with someone. Like in the restaurant, if Ba Dao hadn't helped him, the man in the grey robes would have been very difficult to defeat alone. This is why Lin Feng went to the peach orchard to find serenity. Once he found serenity within his heart, he immediately headed towards the cultivation tower. What Lin Feng needed the most was to increase his cultivation. At that moment, Lin Feng didn't go to the higher floors at all. He immediately went to the 4th floor. Only by stepping on the floor, he could feel the deep and intense pure qi of heaven and earth fluctuating around him. It was extremely pure. Some people who passed the 4th floor saw Lin Feng, who had stopped. It looked like he was looking for a training room within the cultivation tower. However, he was currently acting strangely. They didn't understand if Lin Feng was a new military student, since he didn't seem to understand how things worked. On the 4th floor, one thing that was important to know, each room was reserved by someone and the room was only used by them. In other words, each room on the 4th floor belonged exclusively to someone. Even if they weren't there and the room was empty, nobody would enter them. Therefore, when Lin Feng was checking the 4th floor, he surprisingly found that there were 2 cultivation rooms which were empty. Nobody was practicing inside them. Even more surprising was that the people who were passing by didn't stop and continued walking. In the middle of these 2 rooms was a stone tablet which had the word "Forbidden." Next to that was a name. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.